We've all been guessing, we've all been guesstimating, we've been projecting and speculating and forecasting for quite some time now about the Big Ten's future. Will the Big Ten stay put? Has the Big Ten settled down for the next several years, maybe for the next at least 2 or 3 years, probably settle down once USC and UCLA to be acclimated into the conference? So we have hit a lull, and now we're going to see things kind of settle in. And the SEC with 16 and the Big Ten with 16 schools. Or will the Big Ten continue to pursue? Will they go west to get more Pac-12 schools? Will the Big Ten go east to get some schools from the ACC? Florida State is disgruntled. Well, the Big Ten apparently is not looking to go west, not looking to go just east, looking to go anywhere where they believe they can improve the footprint, the brand, the expanse of the conference. Welcome to the new landscape of college football, a free-for-all between the powerful and the mighty, the Big Ten and the SEC. In the Big 12, just trying to hang on. And the other two, wow, maybe in the history books. We may be reading about the ACC and the Pac-12 in future years and remembering, oh, remember the Pac-12, remember the Pac-10, the Pac-8, remember the ACC. Welcome into the Voice of College Football and a special edition late night, overnight, on a Sunday night into Monday morning. We thought, well, this is the time to go at it right in the here and now. Not that we won't be talking about this during our Big Ten Live show coming up at 6 p.m. on Monday. And then it hit me, how about we just tackle this head on right now? Well, so we appreciate you being here. When you shop on Amazon, which just about all of you do, please use the link that we provide in the description section of the video. So all the videos, the description section, you've got the Amazon link. The Amazon name is in caps, and the link right next to it provides you a entry into Amazon using our link. It's the same shopping experience, does not cost you a penny. So please use the Amazon link and help us grow the channel. Also, we've got a Discord where you talk college football 24/7, 365. We don't do these overnight shows every night. Unfortunately, we don't do these every night. But you know what? You can go to Discord here at the Voice of College Football, and you can talk college football 24/7, 365, just like you are right now in the chat all the time. So please join us on Discord. What you do is you go to patreon.com/MarkRogersTV. patreon.com/MarkRogersTV, and you join us on Discord. And there are tons of other benefits. That's only one, but you get exclusive content and you get my predictions, which will start, of course, here in just a few weeks. And I do not guarantee that I will make you rich. However, my predictions just about every season for the last 40 plus years would cash in. I will simply say that. And of course, our buddy Steve Merrill from Wager Talk went, are you ready for this? 13-1 against the spread last season. We get his exclusive under the radar selection each and every week. All right, let's get to the conversation at hand. And let's keep in mind, this is just rumor as it stands right now. But rumors are sometimes reality. They're substantiated. They come to pass. They come to fruition. There are rumors that are based on fact and reality, but something collapses, something changes, and the rumors were actually valid, but they didn't come to fruition. That doesn't mean the rumor was not valid. The information, the source was not valid, but things changed. And then there are rumors that are ridiculous. And we would have said this about any such Florida State, Clemson, Oregon, or Washington going to the Big Ten years ago, just a few years ago, that this would have been laughable. Well, the Big Ten's not going to go all the way out to the West Coast to get schools or go down to the deep South, Florida State and Clemson. Their options would be in the SEC, of course. All right. We will delve into all of this and, of course, take your comments and questions and your calls as well. We have left the link in the description section of the video. You know, this is a big topic. When I remember to put the link in the description section of the video, we also have the link there in the live chat as well. So please join the show. And we're just going to have a good time talking college football. Now, remember, 4 weekends from right now, we will be truly talking college football. Week 0 is less than 4 weeks away. But for now, realignment talk. Let's go to the phone lines. Welcome to the voice of college football. We got McD on the line.
Mark Rogers on the line at 1 a.m. in the morning.
Had to do it.
I appreciate it. I've been thinking about this all day about obviously the college football expansion between all 4 with Oregon, Washington, Clemson, Florida State. And I gotta be honest with you, Mark. I just don't see Clemson and Florida State going to the Big Ten. I just don't see it.
Why?
I just can't imagine it. I just can't imagine it. I mean, personally, I don't think they're fits in the Big Ten, especially Clemson. I think they're more fits in the SEC. But in my opinion, the school in the ACC to get is Miami. Why would the Big Ten not go after Miami and go after Florida State and Clemson? Not saying those brands are bad. I mean, those are top at worst, top 5 brands in the ACC. But I would think if you want to get a school in the ACC, you'll go to Miami if you want to get into that Florida market over Florida State. I think it's a bit of a smokescreen.
Okay, well, I can give my reasons why certain schools are better fits, but I want to hear why you just made the statement that you did that Florida State and Clemson are not good fits and that Miami is a good fit.
Academics. I know the comment came out or the story came out that um the Big Ten doesn't care so much about the AAU rating when it comes to academics. And to be honest, I don't know if Florida State and Clemson has that rating. I know Miami has that rating. And I also think Miami, I mean, I look at this kind of as revenue, in a revenue point. I think there's a lot of Miami fans across the country, especially in Big Ten territory. I mean, I'm sure there's Clemson and Florida State fans in Big Ten territory, but can you imagine, let's say Miami goes up and plays Indiana? I think that game will be it'll be close to a sellout, if not a sellout, and it'll be mostly Miami fans in Indiana Stadium. I think Miami has a bigger draw than Florida State and Clemson.
Okay, the television numbers would say otherwise.
Well, that's because Miami hasn't been good.
Well, Florida State hasn't been good, but over the last 10 years, Clemson by far has the best TV numbers in the ACC, but they've been extremely good. Obviously,
Right.
they've been by far the best team in the conference and the elite team in the conference. And then Florida State's a strong second, and Louisville actually has slightly better television ratings in the last 10 years than Miami.
Now that last back is surprising that Louisville,
Slightly. They're basically even.
because I think Louisville will be a great fit in the Big 12 personally.
And
But
I am not disagreeing with your perspective exactly. I'm just challenging it because I think you can make an argument for Clemson, Florida State, and Miami in any order. I think that their tier is far above anybody else in the ACC when you add up academics, brand, and of course the football. And then you've got a tier of North Carolina, which actually North Carolina might be by itself. And then you've got some other weaker considerations like Virginia and Georgia Tech, but that also have some components that would make them attractive to the Big Ten. But Clemson, Miami, Florida State, for me, are the 3. And I think we've got a really good debate as to the various strengths that they all bring to the Big Ten.
and I don't disagree with any of that. I personally think Miami's number one. So the only reason I think this is a bit of a smokescreen is because I would think I know TV ratings. Florida State has better TV ratings. I just think maybe I'm captivated by the whole brand. I just think Miami's brand is the best brand in the ACC, hands down. I would think you go after them if anybody in the ACC, personally. But that's just my opinion.
So it's been my thought for a long time, and I produced a video right after UCLA and USC joined. It is 1 a.m., isn't it? Okay, the words aren't coming very quickly. So after the USC and UCLA edition, I produced a video that had the Big Ten at 20. So
Mhm.
there's a number of comments to that video that said I was crazy. I had the Big Ten at 20 teams, and I included two of these four, or actually, I had a couple different models and included all four of these teams as a possibility for the Big 20. Okay, so my thought is this, that my thought was academics being important to the Big Ten, and of course, the football's just as important, and we could have that debate, but that the Big Ten would look at Florida State and Miami. And I didn't know so much if I was thinking that would be their aim or that would be my aim to go after Florida State and Miami, because you grab two schools that are almost identical in terms of their quality. Both of them rank. We bring our buddy Tony Altimore on here, who lays out all the metrics of the
Right.
academics and so forth. Florida State and Miami are basically Big Ten schools when it comes to quality. They're not at the
Okay.
top, they're not at the bottom, they're like right in the middle. And as you just mentioned, Miami just gained this AAU status, which used to be everything to the Big Ten and doesn't seem to be quite as important, but a factor. And
Mhm.
Florida State was in the finalist category for AAU status. And it's only been 3 years since they granted AAU status. So Florida State could get it very soon. And then on top of that, for the Big Ten to take everything that is a strength to that conference, which is everything, but they don't have enough football players to be able to stake two major schools in Florida from a recruiting standpoint and get the state of Florida, where there's a ton of Big Ten transplants in terms of fans.
Right.
I thought Clemson not being as good a school in the rankings, being more of an SEC feel, that maybe Clemson was more leaning SEC, and that Miami and Florida State would come as a pair, as two Florida schools that are rivals going to the Big Ten. That was my thought, and has been my thought.
And I don't disagree with that at all. I actually um agree that Clemson. I definitely think Clemson's more of a fit in the SEC than the Big Ten when it comes to their rivalries and stuff. I mean, and to be honest, as a Maryland fan, I would love these ACC schools to be in the Big Ten, get some old school games back, and it makes perfect sense to go get Florida State. But and I, if they are already on the cusp of AAU, it might work for the Big Ten. I just think I know the AAU means everything to the Big Ten. At least that's the how it's phrased out there. I just thought go get Miami if you want to get into Florida, because I just think Miami's a better brand than Florida State personally. That's what it comes down to for me.
What are you
Uh,
measuring that on?
I mean, just so I mean, the way I'm measuring that is, to believe it or not, I mean, when you look up college football videos on YouTube, when you basically look on conversations, it seems like Miami's spoken a lot more than Florida State. And living up here in the Northeast, I could tell you Miami's more of a national fan base than Florida State.
Okay. I'm not disagreeing with you. I don't have any hard data or even
Yeah,
empirical evidence of that, because I don't, outside of media, I don't know any Florida State fans or Miami fans outside of media friends that I have, and
I
all
do.
of you and the people that I've come into contact that watch the channels.
Mark, I live in Maryland. I could tell you that I know about probably 10 Miami fans and maybe one Florida State fan.
Okay.
So that's what I'm basing it off of, just on my where I am and everything. But I do agree, Oregon and Washington, I think, is going to the Big Ten. I know there's a smokescreen about the Big 12. I don't see Washington going to the Big 12 at all. I think they care so much about academics there that it's Big Ten or bust. I think Oregon and Washington are just linked together, and that's where they're going to end up at. I mean, they already been cleared for it. So I agree with that component of this big report, but I gotta see Clemson and Miami actually get to the Big Ten before I believe it.
Okay. Well, we don't exactly know what clearance means.
True.
So the reason I bring that up is because when that was announced, so I liken that to possibly, I'm not saying that this is the case, but based on everything I read and the people that I talked to and based on my own experience, when you apply for a job, they will do, especially at a major corporation, they'll do a background check, they will vet you out, and you are cleared to
Hmm.
then be eligible to be employed there. And that's kind of how I read into Washington and Oregon's clearance in terms of their application to the Big Ten last fall. It's like when I worked at a corporation and we got 100 applicants to a position, and then HR would go through the legal process and vet their background checks, and 97 out of 100 cleared. That just meant, okay, 3 people were eliminated. The other 97 cleared the background check, and now we can proceed with reviewing resumes. So I'm not saying that's the case, but that's how that hit me. Now we're in a place where it's being rumored, and I don't know, maybe somebody can answer this in the chat, where these rumors originated, because when I look them up, it seems like everybody is citing somebody else. Sports Illustrated, The Spun, there's a lot of sites out there that are just reporting that this is being talked about and this is the rumor, and I don't know where the rumor started.
I don't know where they started either. I just saw reports and thought that I'll just give my 2 cents on it. One more question mark before I let you go, because I'm sure
Sure.
you have other callers. I think Utah is going to land somewhere no matter what. Um, you, I think it's going to be the Big 12 or the Big 10. I'm leaning towards the Big 12. But where do you think that, and it's an open-ended question, and I'll hang up. Where do you think Utah's a better fit in, personally?
From a football standpoint, Utah is better fit in the Big 12. Just in regards to, again, geography is becoming less and less important in all this, but that's what is ingrained in most of us in terms of what schools play against what schools and have whatever in common. It almost all has to do with, except for Notre Dame's national rivalries, it all has to do with geography. Now that's being torn apart. But in terms of a fit, it still has to do with geography. And Utah has much more in common with, especially with Colorado moving to the Big 12, with Big 12 schools. What does Utah have anything to do with anybody in the Big 10? Not
Um,
that it can't happen. I'm just saying,
yeah,
what do they have? USC and UCLA, what do they have in common with anybody in the Big Ten? Well, they are like schools, and they do have a postseason history, and they do share a stadium that is the most prestigious postseason game in the sport. So they do have history there. USC, UCLA in the Big Ten. Utah's got nothing with the Big Ten.
the only reason I ask is because, as I said, I do think Oregon and Washington are going to end up in the Big Ten, and I feel like the Big Ten would take Stanford at the end of the day. I don't know if they're going to take Cal. I just don't. I can't make up my mind about that. So they're going to have a fourth partner somewhere, probably out of the Pac-12. And I'm wondering would they take Utah over Cal just as a fourth partner, and how
Gotcha.
that will fit. So
All right, BC.
that's kind of my thinking. Thanks for taking my call, Mark. Just very interested in all this. I'm very interested to see where this goes. Thanks for taking my call. Go Terps.
All right, let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. Thank you so much for the super chat coming in from Packer 910. Did the ACC grant of rights suddenly disappear in the last 12 hours? So one thing that I read, and this is similar to reports that we've seen ever since Florida State started to raise a ruckus, and that goes back to these Board of Trustee meetings with Florida State going back to January or February, and athletic director Mike Alford basically saying ever since he took the job 2 years ago, he started studying this and really looking for help, meaning consultants, lawyers, research companies, to help look at the grant of rights, look at the responsibilities and the obligations, and try to tear through that and figure out a way to get out. He's done that since day one on the job. He's made that statement. So Florida State's leading this surge from the ACC, apparently. Let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. And one note about Stanford and Cal. I don't know why that hasn't happened yet, but would the Big Ten want Stanford? I might be wrong. I could be wrong about just about anything, just like any of us could be, but I can't imagine that the Big Ten would not take Stanford. And I can't imagine that Stanford, now that the rest of it's crumbling around them, and even before it started to be shaken, that Stanford would not join the Big Ten. I think that that's a marriage made in heaven now that there are other West Coast schools. And then Stanford and Cal, they're very like schools. Of course, they are attached at the hip. I can't imagine that Cal would not go along to the Big Ten with Stanford. All right, here we go. We've got Buckeye Mike on the line.
How you doing, Mark?
I am doing just fine, sir. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So it's funny that you would bring this up or, do this, because I actually made a video about 4 months ago about Florida State and Clemson coming to the Big Ten. Now, yes, it was more of I hope this happens because I want this to happen because it makes, from a football perspective, the conference stronger and deeper. Obviously, not so much with Clemson right now, with basically starting over. But I've gotten onto the bandwagon of Oregon and Washington. And ever since USC UCLA came over, that's kind of the step that I've wanted to take. Now, Miami, to me, makes more sense because, little possibly unknown fact to some people, but the SEC only allows 2 schools in the same state. At least that's the way it looks, and that's what I've been told. Whether or not that's true or not, who knows? And Oregon and Washington make sense to me because when USC and UCLA come over, that's going to be your top tier powers that are left. And you also need to help out your new members, USC and UCLA. So you need more West Coast teams. Your take on Utah, in my opinion, sounds right, to the Big 12. But yeah, and I agree, Stanford most likely, and then you got to think too, the Stanford-Cal rivalry, why wouldn't Stanford bring Cal along with them?
Cal's a great school. It's one of the best schools in the country. And again, yes, they've got a great rivalry with Stanford, and much like USC and UCLA, UCLA was not the gem. They were not the centerpiece of the move with USC. It was USC, but UCLA came along. That could be similar to Stanford and Cal. The one thing I'll say about the SEC and the 2 schools, and I've heard that as well, I don't know the validity of that. It doesn't seem to make much sense to me, except for this. Look at any state that has SEC schools. How many of them have 3 worthy schools to join a Power 5 league? basically none of them except Florida. So Texas would be the next one in line. And obviously they've only been in the SEC for 10 or 11 years. So all of those states only have 2 schools that could possibly be in the SEC anyway. So there are no third schools in any of those states that are SEC caliber. So Florida's unique, and Florida's a much bigger state than almost all of them. It is a much bigger state in population than any of those states except Texas. So I don't know that the SEC would necessarily hold to that tenet.
Right. So I don't know. I don't. So I would almost say that Florida State's a guarantee that it's coming. Obviously, can't guarantee anything. It's all rumors right now. But I guess the up in the air part for me would be who is coming along with them. Because Clemson or Miami are both great options. Miami, especially in the sense of historically, because they were great at one point until we broke them. But I mean, Clemson and Florida State is also another rivalry in a sense.
Florida State folks, and actually Clemson, the Clemson and Florida State people that I know do not consider that a rivalry, but I know some people do.
I guess if it came down to it, who is more likely that 4th team for you?
Oh, 4 teams to the Big Ten?
Mm-hmm. If we're saying Oregon, Washington, Florida State are guaranteed, who would you think would be the 4th team?
So the rumor is Clemson. So take the rumor out of it. I would put Miami in place of Clemson, and these are the reasons why. Clemson, to me, in so many different ways, is more of an SEC school. It's not as high in the academic rankings as Miami. Miami is a much better school. Miami and Florida State are rivals, true rivals. Florida State and Clemson, are they rivals? To a certain extent, they became rivals because they were clearly the 2 best teams in the conference for a large period of time. And that kind of forces teams to be rivals. Ohio State, Penn State, are they rivals? Not really, but they play an important game every year. It's kind of the same deal there. Miami received its AAU status just in the last couple of months. It would open up Florida recruiting. The recruiting ground that Miami and Florida State would bring to the Big Ten is much more important and impressive than what Clemson would bring in South Carolina. Not that Clemson itself wouldn't recruit extremely well, but I don't know that it would open it up for other schools from the Big Ten to go get players in the South. I have said this for a long, long time, ever since this started to be a free-for-all and became less about what's common sense and geography. And once Oklahoma, Texas, and then especially USC, UCLA, I went immediately to Florida State and Miami are great gets for the Big Ten because of recruiting, because of brands, because they're rivals, and because they're excellent schools that would be right in the middle of Big Ten schools academically.
Yeah, I mean, it feels to me the only. I know I said Oregon, Washington, Florida State, but out of the 3 that guarantee, it seems to me like Florida State's the only like real possibility. And going back to the AAU thing, from what I understand, you only have to show that you're at least trying to get the AAU certification. You don't have to have it.
Yeah, and Florida State was in the final 15 in this last round. They were in the final grouping of schools to receive that. And also, as you know, Nebraska has since lost its AAU status. So there is a school in the Big Ten, and it doesn't look like the Big Ten's putting much pressure on Nebraska to regain that status, based on what I've heard and based on people that know more than I do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just all interesting to me, and I hear from some Oregon fans, it's like, well, I know we went into the shoe a couple of years ago and you know stomped them in the chest, but do we really want to go to the Big Ten? It seems like the fans are more geared towards either we'll go to the Big Ten only if more Pac schools are in the Big Ten than in the Big 12, or we want to go to the Big 12. Now, I think it seems more logical to me that whoever of the original Pac is left will be the dominant force within the conference. And I know we're not talking from the Pac perspective, but you also have to think on the flip side, if these schools are coming from the Pac, who is the Pac really going to pick up to survive? Because, I mean, either way, in my opinion, I feel like the Pac is probably going to die in a sense by 2030. I even think, if you pull, maybe you pull Idaho all the way up to Power 5 status, or Boise, pull Boise up, you get SMU and San Diego State, like they were saying, you pull all these group of 5 schools in, and does the Pac, because of having originally group of 5 schools, does the Pac essentially lose their Power 5 status? And do we start to see the Power 5 deteriorate in that way, instead of, well, the conference just doesn't exist anymore? It's not that it doesn't exist. It's more of it lost the Power 5 status.
Well, it's not going to be a conference for very much longer if it's sitting at 9 and it's going to go to 7. And then once there's always a teetering point. There's a threshold where if you get to that number, then the other ones are going to say, we're gone, we're done. You can only solidify, and they can only hold together for so long that they're going to save themselves. Everybody's going to go run and save themselves. This might be a perfect opportunity for the Mountain West to step in. And instead of what we've been thinking the last few years, that the Pac-12 is needing reinforcements and they're going to go to the best schools in the Mountain West might have better leverage to say, you know what, you come to us, and they can pluck off whoever's left, which would be Washington State, Oregon State, and maybe somebody else. I think Utah could do better. I think Utah could go to the Big 12, and maybe the Pac-12 doesn't exist, and the Mountain West bolsters itself by gaining Washington State and Oregon State.
Absolutely. Because the other piece too, and like I said, I know this is like a Big Ten perspective, but the other piece too is there's a lot of rumors out now, especially after the Colorado move, that Arizona could be headed to the Big 12, that they're likely to be the next team headed over there.
All right, Mike, anything else you want to bring up here with other people on the line here we want to get to?
I think that's about it, but I'll hop back in the chat and watch the rest of it.
Thank you, Mike. Have a good night. Appreciate you calling.
You too.
Buckeye Mike on the line. Let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. Again, you shop Amazon. When you do, please use the Amazon link. It's in the description section of all the videos. It says in caps, Amazon. There's a link right next to it. Please use that. It helps us grow the channel. And it's exactly, I promise. I've tested this out with 50 people. It is exactly the same shopping experience. Use that link. You're still logged in. Use that link. And it helps us grow the channel. All right, let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. The real MVPs on the line. What's going on tonight?
Mark, is it true it's almost 1:40 East Coast time where you're at? Right? Man, you're one of the hardest working men I know, Mark. I guess you're trying to stay up to watch the USA Portugal match that takes off at 3 a.m.
Oh,
Is that
yes. If anybody's going to stay up for a soccer game, it's me.
That's what I
What is
figured.
that even? What is that?
It's the World
What
Cup.
tournament? The World Cup? Didn't we just have one of those like last year or the year before?
Yeah, but this is the women's side.
Oh, okay. You know, the only reason I know that there's a women's World Cup is because I saw some completely inane story on some horrible news show the other day that I will put in quotes as news, that was just touting how the women are underpaid and blah, blah, blah. And all I could say was, this story could be corrected with one phrase. It's a business. If you make more money, you get paid more money. The men's tournament, for as much as I could care less about the men's World Cup tournament, of which I've never watched more than 3 seconds, to the point that I once walked into a meeting in a boardroom at ESPN, and the World Cup was on like a 75-inch, because we covered it. We were broadcasting it, and I just made sure that I sat with my back to the screen so I didn't have to watch any World Cup. Anyway, the men bring in a certain amount of money. It's some ridiculous amount of money. And the women bring in a ton of money as well. But there's all this clamoring for equal pay. Well, bring in the same amount of money. I don't know what to tell you. You get paid proportionate to how much money you earn. That's my rant about the World Cup and all of that.
Well, Mark, that was a pretty good rant. So, the reason I think all this news websites are coming up with rumors is for a similar reason. They need clicks. They need money. What's the best way to make money? Throw out some rumor that you heard from some guy's brother's cousin's nephew, sister-in-law's brother that Clemson and Florida State's going somewhere.
Well, sure, except we've heard in recent months about Colorado, and they left. And we've heard about the other schools in the Pac-12, and we know that Arizona is in discussions and talking about it. And none of us would be surprised if we saw Arizona State, or some semblance of a couple more schools in the Pac-12 fleeing for the Big 12. And we also know that the Big 10 has grabbed USC and UCLA. And so as soon as they did that, there was talk about Stanford, Cal, or Oregon, Washington. So that wouldn't be a big shock. And then we also know on top of that, that the Florida State athletic director, as I stated a few minutes ago, from the day he took the job, he has said publicly, I instantly hired lawyers and consultants and a research firm to determine, how do we get out of this grant of rights? What are the obligations? What do we need to do? How much are we being, are we in the hole from a revenue comparison standpoint to Big Ten and SEC schools? He's gone through the whole thing. So this is all public record. He's gone to the Board of Trustees. He said, we're about winning championships. Our brand is about competing for championships, and that will be impossible in this league. We need to do something. So there is more than just people throwing out rumors just for the sake of it.
I can see that in some cases, but I think the new players that are entering the equation are doing it for clickbait reasons. Like I saw today, Jason Shearer, a trusted reporter, said, hey, this is a good week to watch Arizona. I trust that reporting, or that breadcrumb he put out today, because he's at it for a while. He got the Colorado move right. But it's just weird to me that new people are all of a sudden talking about realignment after the Colorado news broke. That's all I'm saying.
Well, hopefully you're not putting us in that category, because you will
gosh,
know
no.
there are all sorts of folks out there on YouTube that talk realignment and have been for 3 years every day. And I've not been one of those people, because I only talk about it when I believe there's some level of substance to it.
Oh, yeah. And I think that gives us a perfect shout out to Golden Blue Dude, Mark. I mean, thoughts out to him and his family still.
Absolutely.
So I'm looking at the teams that are left available for the Big Ten and SEC, Mark. And when do we start asking, are we going to take away teams? Because I'm looking at the complete list of teams to get to 24, and I'm thinking, well, if we take away a team like a Vanderbilt, a Northwestern, and Indiana, and replace them with the better school, the overall conference makes more money. Do you think that could eventually happen?
The way we're headed, I would never say never now. I would have said 99% never 5 years ago. Now I would say more like 70 or 75%. I'm pretty sure that it's not going to happen. But to your point, each school in the Big Ten is going to earn, I don't know what the figure is, something like somewhere between, depending on how it's counted, $80 and $100 million per school. Well, Indiana is not making the conference $80 to $100 million in football television revenue per year. I'm just throwing out a number. I think it's fairly accurate. They're worth $20 million. Ohio State could be making $200 million. It's $80 to $100 million for each Big Ten school. Let's understand, all you have to do is look at the TV ratings and say, well, Ohio State's worth, like, they are, of course, pulling way over their weight in this. So yeah, does the conference, but nobody seems to have ever been, this has been going on for years, that this evaluation of any conference could have been made and said, you know what, every school in the SEC is making $75 million. Well, Bama's worth $150 million, and that's probably conservative, and Vandy's worth 10 or 15 million. Why don't we get rid of them? But it's not happened. You still need somebody to play.
I understand that, Mark. I understand there needs to be a few bottom teams, but I think the complete bottom might be completely rid of. But, Mark, the last caller, Buckeye Mike, was talking about Utah. And the Utah athletic director, he's been running his mouth a bit on Twitter before any of the corner schools were going to leave. He quote tweeted Dennis Dodd. He quote tweeted John Kurtz. And, Mark, I like pettiness. A better man probably wouldn't, but I like pettiness. So if I was Brett Yormark, I would print out those tweets. I would put it in a letter and said, you're staying in the Pac-12, and there you go, independent. I wouldn't send a Utah an invite solely because of their athletic director.
Well, now you would be then the petty one.
I understand that, Mark, but you know what? Actions have consequences, and if you want to run your mouth and belittle the Big 12, and the Big 12 is the only mouth that can feed you, it's going to come back and bite you. And that's why I feel bad for Utah, because I think, honestly, at the end of this, they're going back to independent status.
Well, I don't know this for sure, but we could probably uncover some social media posts from the University of Colorado University, my apologies, CU, over the last 10 years that might not have been the most complimentary after they left the Big 12. I don't know.
Well, hey, Mark, it may be, maybe not, but I just think doing it so publicly may be a big mistake. It's a perception issue at the very least that needs to be ironed out.
We see that every 4 years when presidential candidates trash every other presidential candidate in their party until they win the nomination, and then they're best friends. So the Big 12 is going to add Utah if it makes sense for them, and I think it does make a lot of sense for them.
Well, anyway, Mark, that's all I got for you today. Have a great rest of your day, Mark, and fight on.
Thanks to Real. We will keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. I'm sure you have a scenario and opinion that makes sense to you. Let's see what we've got from Hank.
Hey, can you hear me?
We've got you, Hank. What's going on tonight?
I just wanted to bring up the whole Big Ten thing.
Okay.
I don't see the Big Ten adding any teams.
Okay.
Until they find out something from Notre Dame. Notre Dame is that one team. That's their unicorn. They want it. They really want that.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Ever since this started to ramp back up with all the expansion, there's no question that everybody knows that the Big Ten wants Notre Dame more than any other school. But does that mean that the Big Ten should do nothing and just wait on Notre Dame. That might be foolish.
But it might be foolish to act too hasty.
Sure.
You might put them in a spot where Notre Dame, they don't fit in the SEC, but they might be pushed there.
It's up to the rest of college football to determine what Notre Dame has to do. If Notre Dame's left to its own devices, then they're probably going to stay independent. But if the other conferences force Notre Dame to join a conference, they can certainly do that. They could freeze them out. I don't know that they're going to have that kind of cooperation to do that, but that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, it's in that spot. And unfortunately, a lot of schools are walking that tight line, trying to figure out, well, we won in this conference, and that conference is waiting on a decision from Notre Dame. And Notre Dame loves that. They really do. They love holding the Big Ten over it.
Sure they do. If Notre Dame joins a conference, then they're going to lose that last bit of unique quality that makes them Notre Dame. And I know that they're not going to become just this completely different brand. So maybe I overstated that, but they're going to lose that one component that is unique only to them at this point. They're the only real independent in the country left.
Yeah, truly unique, one of a kind. But eventually,
any other points, Hank?
But eventually, they're going to have to pick one or the other. One of two conferences, because we know the ACC is treading water. We know that the Pac's already singing. So there's only two conferences.
Well, here's my point, Hank. They're only going to be forced to join a conference if one of two things happens. Either they're forced by the other conferences who will say, you have to join a conference to be part of the playoff, or you have to join a conference because we refuse to schedule you. Our member schools will not schedule you. You will have no one to play. Or the money becomes so monumental in those two conferences that Notre Dame will say, while we have all this academic money, we've got billions and billions and billions on top of each other, it's not making business sense anymore to make $25 million on a TV contract when we could make $90 million on a TV contract, which, again, we all have to consider. It's not just the difference between 90 and 25. It's the difference between, in 10 years, 900 million and 250 million. Are we willing to play football and earn 650 million less than we would have otherwise in joining a conference? So I believe, unless I'm missing something, one of two things has to happen. Either there is to be cooperation, enough cooperation among the conferences in college football, especially the SEC and the Big Ten, to freeze out Notre Dame. And I don't see that happening. I don't see that cooperation coming. Or the money is just going to be so substantial that Notre Dame can't refuse that from a business standpoint.
The SEC would be happy to freeze out Notre Dame. The Big Ten is just looking at.
They don't do it now.
Yeah, but the Big Ten, the money regionally, Notre Dame fits in the Big Ten.
Yes.
And would make their TV contracts explode. And I say explode, and they're already big contracts.
Yes.
I mean, Notre Dame didn't fit in the SEC. But at a certain point, they're determined to hold their own.
They have been. They definitely have been.
Yes, they have.
All right, Hank, anything else?
No, that's about it.
Well, thanks for calling tonight. We appreciate hearing from you. Have a good night.
Yep.
All right. We will keep it moving along. We got Immaculate View. Immaculate,
Hey.
appreciate you being here.
Back on the show with you. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing just fine. Thought we needed to go live with this before anything else changes.
Yeah, it's interesting. This one's going out pretty wide pretty quick. You've seen it on MSN. I saw someone else say it's on Barstool, and it really just popped up today. I think all these media are just reading Twitter.
Well, that's where it's at these days.
Seems to be the case. The FSU stuff seems to have some smoke to it. I have no idea why Clemson is part of this. I think it's just I consider that to be SEC bait. Try and make the SEC make some moves. Just doing the math on the PAC situation. For some of those schools, it's a really bad situation. They're down below 10, which is the minimum for a conference championship. In order to add any Mountain West schools, it's going to cost them $34 million. So to have a school there for next season, it's going to cost them $34 million, unless you think that some central school now wants to travel all the way out to PAC land while they might be closed down in a couple of years. So for Washington and Oregon, they're looking at maybe not getting paid for next year if they don't find another home. So I would say, I think for a conference like the Big Ten, they're looking at Washington. I think that's in the plan. That's in the works. So they have to figure out a way to move this whole show faster, so that way that they can go ahead and grab that. So like I said, I think the Florida State and Clemson stuff is SEC bait to try to get them to move, to keep everyone getting larger at the same pace. Could Oregon go along with that? Maybe. Not quite sure. You know, we've talked about some smoke that Oregon may have upset some folks in the Big Ten. I think the networks probably love them. If you're NBC having a later night show, you're looking at that saying, yeah, we'll take Oregon games, no problem. It's a good stadium. It's a good home crowd. It's loud. Shows good on TV. I think that the networks probably definitely want Oregon, but I think maybe the Big Ten schools aren't sure on it. So there's a whole lot of drama going on, and what we're seeing on the tip here is just, the tip of the iceberg. But this FSU stuff, if they're willing to pay all that it would take to get to the Big Ten, I don't see why not. I mean, I like Miami to the Big Ten just because I think in the Big Ten, they can turn their brand around. Whereas FSU is already getting 5 stars, 4 stars. Like, if they go into the SEC, I think they do well. I think they finally got their stuff together is what I'm saying. They could go anywhere they want. But I think Miami is a good pickup for the Big Ten because it gets you down there, and it's kind of bait for Notre Dame, convicts and Catholics.
Yeah, you think the Big Ten would bring in Miami by itself, and it would have this satellite out there in Miami that's thousands of miles away from anybody else?
I like if you were to have a division on the East, I like, maybe a Notre Dame, Penn State, Miami, Maryland, Rutgers type of division. And there's a whole lot of old rivalries in there. Penn State and Miami had some stuff going on. We had Miami with those other school. It's a stretch, but
Penn State and Miami are rivals.
I didn't say rivals. They have history.
They played a big game once. Yes.
Same back in history, back when both of these brands were massive.
One big game. Yes. Yeah.
And Miami, as they say, the farther south of Florida you go, the more north you go. There's an awful lot of northern expats down there. So, but this Florida State thing, this is kind of out of the blue. I mean, just look at where Tallahassee is on the map. Forget state borders and just look at how close it is to almost the entire heart of the SEC territory. You take Ohio State, you play them down there. You take Michigan, you play them down there. You take Penn State, you play them down there. You take USC, you play them down there. You take Wisconsin, you name a Big Ten school, you play them down there. Now, any recruits that you're trying to get from down there, you can tell them, hey, when we come down there, your family can come see you play.
Sure.
So and if you add Florida State and Miami together, well, now schools can maybe even say we get down there almost every single year. So if I'm the SEC, I'm not allowing that to happen. That's just my prediction on that, is that we could see Washington go to Big Ten. You maybe see Oregon, but I think the others, that this starts to loosen up the SEC.
When you say if you're the SEC, you don't allow that to happen, how do you not allow that to happen if the Big Ten has a greater revenue distribution? And of course, the SEC is not going to give Florida State a larger distribution than its current schools.
Number one, I do believe we are going to get to a point where they are going to have divisions again. We'll have new rules for that. So when you start to look at this, you start saying, who are we going to put you in a division with? Two, there is some risk, in my opinion, to Florida State going and joining, the Northern, the Coast to Coast Conference, and not having a lot of competition against the same schools in the area. Maybe those kids down there who are going to them are less interested.
Sure.
Because in the ACC, at least you have Clemson, Georgia Tech, the Carolinas. It's still kind of down in the Southern geography. So, there's a bit of a risk to it, but I would say most of the Florida State people that we talk to, and we have some talks in the background, actually want the Big Ten. They don't want to go to the SEC. So we could be surprised.
All right, man. Anything else?
That's it. Oh, and I know something I'm seeing over here just about the Stanford. I really don't think it's possible for them to join the Big Ten. I think if it was, the Big Ten would have already invited them. You get into some of the research stuff, a lot of the sharing that happens in the Big Ten. I know a lot of people look at them in California and think this is a no-brainer, but I do believe there's a lot more to it on the academic side of things that makes it a problem. So for people who are thinking that there's a spot saved for them, I don't think so.
Okay.
But that's
All
it
right.
for me.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Well, I did not want to belabor the last statement there, but that was kind of vague. Like, what are the hangups of Stanford not joining the Big Ten? So I don't know that statement's not accurate or invalid, but obviously that's just kind of pulled out of thin air in terms of, okay, what would that be? Why would Stanford not be able to leave the Pac-12? What obligations or legal connections do they have to the Pac-12 that any other Pac-12 school does not have? Somebody would have to prove that to me in some logical way. All right, our buddy Joey's here, late night. Joey, what's going on?
Hey, Mark, how you doing, buddy?
I am doing just fine. How are you?
I'm doing great. So first thing I want to say is we have over 290 people in here and only 76 thumbs up. So come on, guys, hit the thumbs up button. If you're on your phone and you can't find a thumbs up, just exit the chat, hit the thumbs up, and then hit live chat to come back in. So that's all you got to do, guys. So
we actually, with the other channels included, have 366 on the line.
Oh, yeah. That's true. So hit that thumbs up wherever you are, guys. So, let's get that thumbs up going. So listen, I'm cautiously optimistic about all this because I'm optimistic because, hey, if the ACC starts falling apart, that could bring some teams into the Big 12 that would help West Virginia, and like teams like Pitt or Syracuse or someone like that. I would love to see some of them old rivalries come back. So nothing would make me happier. But a lot of people saying Florida State, this is coming out of the blue, and that's not true at all. Florida State has put out a statement that, but that the ACC has to August the 15th to make a decision. And August 15th, they're going to make a decision whether or not they're going to leave. So, they've kind of put that on the ACC. I mean, Florida State's kind of put that out there a while back. So, one thing too, I'm also seeing a lot of people in the chat saying, well, you can get out of the ACC for nothing because ESPN owns all the teams, and they got contracts with everybody and stuff, so they can get out. Not true either, because there's a $50 million exit fee. So, and I don't know if precedence has been set since the new contract was signed. I don't think it has, because they signed the new contract after Maryland left the ACC. So the new contract doesn't have any precedence set. So these teams would be obligated to pay $50 million to just leave. Period.
So your point about the TV revenue, Joey, is that it's reported and is substantiated that Florida State and any school in the ACC, if they left the conference, would give up the revenue from home games, television from the home games. But since they're going to another conference that is also feeding into the ESPN family of networks, it just trades hands, and they really don't have to give up that money.
Well, I don't know about all of that. I mean, that's what people in the chat are saying, and yeah, you might be right about that, but there's still the $50 million exit fee, so they would be responsible for that.
Which is
And
1
50
year in the Big Ten, which is the difference.
Right. One year in the Big Ten. That's 1 year in the SEC. Almost 1 year in the Big 12. They give out $44 million per team.
Yeah, but I'm
last year.
talking
So,
about the difference between the ACC and the Big Ten. That's $50
Right.
million.
oh yeah, sure. Yeah, it is. That's huge. So I'm all for. Now listen. What scares me about all this is our college football being hurt and downgraded to, the teams that they choose, right? The teams that these bigger conferences choose. So in other words, there's going to be, if conferences, if the ACC and the Big Ten or Pac-12 start falling apart completely, and they're gone, which we're pretty sure the Pac-12 is probably headed that direction. If that happens, well, there's going to be teams left out of this that aren't going to be in Power 5 status anymore. That worries me. I don't want nothing to happen to our college football. I want to see Oregon State and Washington State, Cal. I want to see all of them play football.
Yep.
And unfortunately, I don't know if that's going to happen. And somebody the other day in a chat conversation said, well, the SEC will just bring somebody in and kick Vanderbilt out. That ain't going to happen. Vanderbilt's a founding member of the SEC. You can't just boot them out. That wouldn't be very easy at all. They couldn't do that, and they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't do that. Number one, that would downgrade their academic level in the SEC tremendously. So that would never happen. But I mean, I'm just watching comments and just wanted to make those statements. I don't think that it would be too damaging to go down to 4 conferences, because there's plenty of room for everybody, providing the Big Ten, the SEC, and teams or these conferences open up their doors like the Big 12 is right now. But if you start dissolving 2 conferences, there's not room for everybody. There's just not. I mean,
yeah,
all of a sudden you're going to lose some teams, and I worry about the Wake Forest. I worry about the Oregon State and those teams like that. So, but I have everybody's been talking about it here lately, and I've been saying it for a while. Oregon State has been trying to get attention to the Big 12 for quite a few months. They've got their attention. Did that invite come? I don't know. But I think the invite could come to Oregon State, especially if some of these other teams start jumping over to the Big Ten, and teams like Arizona and Arizona State and Utah hold out and stay in the pack. You could see Oregon coming to the Big 12, I believe. So that's what I think.
I think that Brett Yormark wants his conference to be as strong from a quantity and quality standpoint, and as expansive, and to cover as much territory and as many time zones as possible. But it probably comes down to he needs the presidents to be on board, and he needs the television money to make sense to a certain extent, because obviously the distribution becomes devalued the more teams you bring on if they don't keep the money per team threshold as high as it needs to be. So you may take a hit to your finances per school, but I fully believe that Brett Yormark wants as many quality sports franchises as possible.
Right. And someone told me the other day, I don't know how true it is. I've not been able to confirm this, but that they've told the Big 12 they can bring on one more team for full revenue share because we've got Colorado.
Mm.
They've got full revenue share. We can have one more Power 5 team.
No,
I
they
don't
better make it
necessarily
count.
believe that.
If
Yeah,
that
I
is the
don't
case,
necessarily
they
believe.
better.
Right, I don't believe that's true. I really don't. I think that if you bring, it's according to who you bring in, right? That's what I believe. So if you bring in Utah or Arizona, yeah, okay, full revenue share. You bring in Arizona or I'm sorry, Oregon State or Washington State, maybe not full revenue share. Maybe the TV networks wouldn't go for that. So I think it would be according to who that next one is, and then maybe what some of the holdup is to find out. Okay, this team's interested. What will that do with our revenue? So we know UConn's interested, right? But they're a Group of 5 team. They could only get $20 million by entering the Big 12. So, well, actually, I don't think the $20 million is even guaranteed for a Group of 5. I don't believe anything is for a
No.
Group of 5 team. So, UConn would be a great basketball addition. Wouldn't be much in football right now, but they used to have a great football program back in the early 2000s. So they could bring it back.
Well,
But
we'll hold up on the great term.
Well, yeah, that's true. They were a decent football program.
Yeah.
Decent. They were decent, right? They weren't great. They were decent. But anyway, so I think that I would love to see the ACC dissolve for selfish reasons, right? To bring in some teams into the Big 12 that would be better suited for our area around West Virginia. Pitt, Syracuse, some of those teams. I would be happy with that. But I would not be happy to see teams like Wake Forest go away or Oregon State over here in the Pac-12 or Washington State or whoever it might be. I don't want to see teams go away and lose their Power 5 status. So that's my only concern about all this.
Yeah. Maybe the American Conference is licking its chops to get back into the game after losing the 3 schools that they did last year, that they could pick up the likes of Syracuse, Boston College, Wake Forest, those kind of schools.
Yeah, that would be good. That would be good. And then, could they actually build a power league with teams left over? That would be a good question to ask because we don't know what teams would be left over. But could they create a power league out of it? So, and that's a possibility. And I'm not saying that they would get Power 5 status. What I'm saying is, people wouldn't be so down on a team out of there making the playoffs.
I think that what would be left would be something close to what they would have had the last 10 years with the likes of UCF and Cincinnati and Houston. They're pretty much going to be able to replace that level of team and be the 6th best conference or 7th. Well, at that point, how many conferences do we have? But that they're going to fulfill that Group of 5 spot.
Yeah,
in the playoffs.
But I don't want to see us. I really don't want to see us lose any Power 5 conferences. I really don't.
I don't either.
I want to keep our football going. That's what we all live and breathe is football. So but anyway, I'll get out of here and let somebody else come in. But let me say this. So we jumped up in the thumbs up to 112. So great job, guys. Can we get it to 200 though? If you haven't hit the like button yet, if you're on your phone, exit the chat. Just hit the little X button right there at the chat. Hit the thumbs up button. Then hit live chat to come right back into the chat. If you're on the computer, it's right there beside of you, man. Hit the like button. So, all right, guys.
Thanks, Joey.
Thanks, Mark.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you, buddy.
All right. Joey Foster laying down some knowledge there. And we did want to answer this question. I started to read this and then the conversation went elsewhere. So again, the grant of rights, there's a clause in the grant of rights that if this league is no longer competitive, if there's a certain amount of schools that all band together to leave and the league's no longer competitive, that's one way to get out of it. another way to get out of it, and how that's interpreted by legal terms in terms of, are you no longer competitive? I think that could be reasonably founded if you're making $30 million per team and there are other leagues making $90 million per team, would be one way. And then the other would be that Florida State, again, depending on the role that these networks play in this, if they're willing to transfer, basically ESPN has everything except for the Big Ten now. So everybody's playing on an ESPN network. So if they're simply trading properties from league to league, but they're still under their umbrella, then they could dismiss that issue with giving up the TV revenue, because they're the ones making, or they're the ones paying it out. So they just pay it out through a different league back to let's say Florida State, and Florida State just worries about the exit fee, and the exit fee is covered in 1 year's difference between playing in the ACC and playing in the Big Ten. That's the simple math, or the simple explanation. I'm sure it's a little bit more complicated than that. We do have Sean coming up. Sean, how you doing tonight?
Great. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing just fine. What's going on?
Nothing. I'm just obviously seeing this potentially huge news. Don't want to get ahead of anything exactly, but just wondering, as these leagues just get more bloated, and how awkward is this just going to make all of this scheduling, and how much does this actually like demute as you know, particularly the Big Ten and the SEC just become these massive conglomerates, and you know they just reach their tentacles, because I can't imagine they're going to be done expanding anytime soon. How much does this actually like diminish the brand in a way of the Big Ten? So first off, like the scheduling, like how is that going to work out? We're going to have leagues here about the size of professional sports leagues.
Yes. And so that's your answer right there, is that the larger the leagues become, the more that they're going to be sanctioned into silos to play in some kind of formatted way, where you can then maybe build a West Wing of the Big Ten, and you go from a place where divisions were abolished to where divisions are going to have to be mandatory, because there's no way you've got 24 teams in a league, 1 through 24, because there's no way to determine the champion without having divisions.
Yeah, you're going to play 9. You have 9 games, so every team is going to miss more than half of the league.
Yes,
every single year.
Ridiculous. Yeah, absolutely. So you have to have divisions to determine who's going to play in some kind of championship game or mini playoff. You might have a 14 playoff within the conference to play. So it then becomes a mini NFL type situation. And the teams on the West Coast just never see the teams on the East Coast, except for similar to what they do now in playing a cross-country non-conference game. So they play a minimal amount of games across the country. Actually, the non-revenue sports are the ones that have difficulty, but even that was fairly well explained by the Big Ten in terms of how they would have handled and will be handling USC and UCLA in the non-revenue sports. So those are the ones where the travel's the issue. Not so much.
Could you explain that to me? I'm not exactly familiar with the Big Ten's position on that.
In terms of the non-revenue sports?
Real quick, yeah.
In terms of the travel, well, I don't have it in front of me, and it's been a year, so I don't remember the specifics, but I thought it was fairly well explained at the time of how they would get around those type of issues.
Well, I mean, like
a lot more care to a baseball team traveling east. It's similar to the old days, and they may still do this, where if a basketball team, let's say Arizona State, travels to Oregon, they play Oregon and Oregon State, and they play them on a Thursday and a Saturday. And the Pac-12 has been doing that for decades. They would take a similar, these baseball teams, especially from the North and the Northeast and the Northwest, they play their first 6 weeks of a baseball season in the South and in the Southwest anyway.
Yeah, a friend of mine played softball at Notre Dame back when they were still in the Big East, and they had to play, like South Florida was in the league at the time. And a lot of the American Athletic Conference has had to deal with this issue for quite a while, and those are obviously smaller revenue schools with smaller budgets, and they've made that work. But so, and then like one thing while we're talking about TV, on the subject of TV rights, is this maybe a bit of an outdated model that teams are anticipating, like these TV deals to be this valuable going forward? I mean, ESPN is not the hegemon in the sports world that it was. It's becoming a lot more disparate. I mean, could the money for these TV rights just in a couple of years, as things, as the media distribution landscape changes, could it just not be there and it not be as lucrative as they're thinking it is now?
Yes and no. So obviously the answer is going to be either yes or no. I'll give you a reason why it could be yes and a reason why it could be no. The reason it could be yes is exactly what you're talking about. I was looking up numbers just last night as we were talking about this, that ESPN has lost, oh my word, the number of subscribers. I could not find a current count. I know they maxed out around 112 million TV homes at one point. No, I'm sorry. The universe, meaning within the United States, was like 112 or 113, and ESPN at its peak went over 100. So they had like 92, 93% of the households, and now it's down into the 80s. So they've lost about 20 to 25% of their households, and that continues to go down. So you're logical in saying that the money's going to dry up from the main revenue source, which has been ESPN, and now is Fox and ESPN and CBS and NBC. So we're seeing the Big Ten make a smart move in distributing its sources from a number of places. So that's a good financial move, but it's also a good marketing move because they're like the NFL. They're going to be on every TV network all day on Saturday. And their games are going to be promoted before the game, after the game. They're constantly going to be on every network having their games promoted. So to get back to your point, but as long as the overall number of people watching this only continues to grow because the nation's expanding from a population standpoint, the market's dwindling because people have other options of what to do, what to watch, playing games on their phone, doing whatever they do, sit on TikTok. So there are more options out there, but the total number of people's growing. So I just think that the money is still going to be there. It's just going to come from more sources. It's going to come from streaming sources, going to come from more networks.
So they're going to have to operate like on several different potential rights deals. I mean, could the Big Ten, license out their distribution rights to, I don't know. I mean,
well, they've already made their decision for the next 7 years. Yeah. So we know where they're going to be for the next 7 years.
Okay. All right. Now, going forward, the ACC, they've got a lot of prize apples that I can't imagine, the bigger conferences not having their eye on right now. I think the real prize in the ACC is actually not Clemson or Florida State or Miami. I think it's North Carolina.
From what standpoint?
Because I think, well, one, it is a top 10 population state. It's got a huge national brand. Their basketball is obviously top notch. It's an elite academic university institution. It has, I think it has a lot. And I think from a football standpoint, the state of North Carolina itself is growing. The quality of, the recruiting ground is getting better there. I think that they're too lucrative, I think, to be left alone and to be.
Oh, I totally agree with you.
And to be left in a crumbling or a diminished ACC. Someone's
Oh,
got
absolutely. Oh, they're fine. They have nothing to worry about. So I agree with all your points, but not to the extent that you made them.
okay. I mean,
All the points that you made, except for the status of the school, could be made about the state of Florida and probably even amplified.
yeah, absolutely, for sure. And so yeah, and Virginia, also huge school with a huge endowment and elite academics and very, very good sports outside of football. Not they don't offer much in the way of football, but you know, those two schools mainly, and then you've got like Georgia Tech for its academics, I guess. I don't know. I mean, but I'm saying so. And my thought is, I think all of the Pac-12 schools that don't go to the Big Ten are going to end up in the Big 12. That's kind of what I feel happening, and the Big 12. And we might end up with like a Big 12 and an like instead of it being like the Power Five and the Group of Five, we're going to have, the two behemoths, and then you're going to have very, very diminished brands in the Big 12 and the ACC.
Oh, we're still going to have an ACC.
I mean, like, there's too many, unless it falls apart. Like, almost everyone in the ACC is like too valuable not to go to these conferences. And we're going to have 30-team leagues at some point.
Sure. So based on everything that you just said, it doesn't sound like the ACC is going to be left with enough. They'll have enough schools. They'll have like 8 schools, but
Yes.
they're not going to have a league that can play football with the other ones.
Oh, no. But I mean, the Big 12 is not really going to have that either right now. I mean, what's the Big 12's top program? Oklahoma State now?
Yeah. I consistently make the point that you're making right now that there are different ways to tackle this. I'm tackling it from a money standpoint and just a survival standpoint. If you're talking about competing for national championships, yes, I don't think the Big 12 is equipped to do that.
But
I don't think they have a school that can do that. But
Sorry,
they can play football and make money. They have no issue if they stay right where they're at. They're going to make plenty of money and play football, and their champion's going to get a playoff spot and possibly their second place team ad nauseum for the next couple decades. The ACC, if they lose the kind of schools we're talking about, they're going to be irrelevant.
Yeah. Is it? Yeah, potentially. I mean, they could pull in some of these other programs too. They might. You could maybe get a West Virginia to jump ship and there renew that rivalry with.
Why would West Virginia jump ship from a position where the Big 12 is becoming stronger to an ACC that's losing schools left and right? I don't know that they would make that move, even though geographically it makes sense and they have more rivalries there. They wanted that, I believe, at one point 10 years ago, but they didn't get it at that point.
I mean, if the ACC can maintain, some of their flagship schools, the Virginia Tech, UNC, they're going to be. I mean, the Big 12, as it's currently constituted, is I think still a ways behind the ACC in terms of revenue and prestige. Then
wait a minute, who's behind the ACC in revenue?
What the Big 12 possibly? I mean,
no, not if this move. First of all, they're not. We already know what those numbers are going forward. That the Big 12 payout per year is higher than what the ACC. It's very close, but it's although to be fair, the ACC ascends, its contract ascends, so its worst years is behind it in terms of this grant of rights. But the money that they're making up in the last half of this grant of rights deal isn't enough for it to really matter. But yes, the Big 12 is more valuable right now than an ACC minus the teams we're talking about. We're having this discussion because not because the ACC is the ACC as it currently stands today. It's because we're projecting an ACC without Florida State, Clemson, or Miami, or all three gone.
Yeah.
And then it's not the Big 12. It's not nearly as good as the Big 12.
So the Big 12, even with, adding, 4 fairly immediate, they losing 2 monster programs and replacing them with 4 very, as far as by Power 5 levels, they're very, they've very
lost
low
2 of the top 10 brands in the sport, and they've replaced them with like the 50th.
Yeah.
Schools in the 50 range in terms of brand, but with a lot of potential. UCF in particular.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Last point, Sean, if you got anything else.
No, I'm all good, Mark. You have a great night.
Yeah. Appreciate you calling.
Thank you.
We will keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football, and got to hear from our USC contingent out there, the most west satellite of the Big Ten. Tim, what's going on tonight?
No, I think UCLA might be farther west.
Okay.
Yeah, want to get
by what, like 12 miles?
Yeah, a few miles.
Okay.
It's a great topic you have, but I missed part of the beginning. Do you think that the Big Ten would go past 20 teams? Doing the math, that would be 20. And obviously the elephant in the room is Notre Dame, because Notre Dame is the big fish in all of this.
Okay.
You think they're skipping Notre Dame? I'm
going to say that, as I'm looking at these comments, my apologies. I'm going to say that I'm going to stick to what I've been saying for ever since this started 2 years ago, that there's going to be 2 major factors that are going to cause the Big Ten or the SEC to continue this game. One is going to be, what is going on? We are going to have punch, counter punch. So that's going to either continue. So the SEC punched, the Big Ten counter punched, and this may continue. Or if either one of these conferences survey the land and say, they're good for us, let's go get them. And there's not many of those schools left that increase the value of your conference.
How many increase the value of the Big Ten? I don't think we've named them.
Very
None
few,
of them.
maybe just Notre Dame, Florida State, Clemson. I don't know how many. Oregon, maybe not. And I know that offends some Oregon fans. We don't mean that it doesn't make it a better football conference, but when the money's divided, it may not increase the value of the conference. The meaning the networks may not be able to be willing to pay more to increase the per payout per school.
Yeah, I don't know what's changed, because Colorado's decided that they can't win a game in the Pac-12, so they're gonna move over to the island of misfit toys, try to win a couple in that conference.
When you say the island of misfit toys, it's because they've pulled schools from all over the nation?
No, because they pulled G5 schools. Well, let's look at it.
Well, they had to.
The Big 12. Is that really the Big 12? Pretty much all the names we know in the Big 12 are gone. Is that right or wrong? Let's be logical about this. Look at the teams that used to be the Big 12.
Well,
pretty damn good conference.
Based on what's left, this is what I consider to be legitimate original Big 12 school. Texas Tech, Iowa State, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, about 5 of them. Maybe I'm missing somebody.
Right.
5 of them.
When you thought about
That's
the
it.
Big 12, were those the schools you thought about, Mark?
Well, I thought about Oklahoma and Texas first and foremost.
Well, but they're gone. Obviously they're gone.
I just named
and Texas are the cream of the crop there.
Yeah, I just named the 5 schools that I consider to be the heart of the Big 12. So the other 7 are what you're talking about.
Nebraska, Missouri, A&M, they've all left. The Big Ten, SEC. And so what they did is they backfilled it with a bunch of G5 schools.
They had to.
Right? They had to. But that's that's why I call them the Island of Misfit Toys, because now which teams in the Big 12 might get stolen up by the Big the Big Ten or the SEC at this point.
I don't think anyone.
Not a single one.
No.
So they're stable because no one wants them.
Yeah.
Therefore, the Island of Misfit Toys. That's
Absolutely.
why I call them that. If you're a kid, remember that way long time ago? You're old enough to me. If they're all the toys nobody wanted.
I know exactly where you're at. I haven't been as creative as you. I haven't been as creative as you, but I've said that from when all this happened and they grabbed the other 4 schools, that that somehow the Big 12 became stable based on mediocrity, where the ACC and the Pac-12 became unstable because they had valuable commodities for the other 2 conferences.
A perfect cracker. Perfect. What a great name. Your school, TCU, got eviscerated in that championship game. So settle down with, we had a team. Great. Those guys are playing out of their minds and everything. My hat's off to them. But the fact they got that far just showed when they got to that championship game that they really didn't belong there. That was just a bloodbath. I mean, those kids played out of their minds. Great coaching, absolute gutsy performances. Good job against Michigan, but they got exposed in that game.
So before Tim comments on this, because he'll probably explode on the one I just put on the screen. Let me jump in first.
That guy's an idiot, so I don't really care.
Let me jump in first. Our guy at Hall of Fame College Football Podcast, Jason, we love you, but nobody, please make a narrative out of one game. Please do not do that.
No, you're right.
I will just tear that to shreds. You do not make a narrative about one game in history. Yes, we can talk about every Alabama has lost to Louisiana Monroe. So you can make a narrative out of any game in history that doesn't make sense. So there's no reason to do that.
Again, Willie Fritz, people don't give him credit. That Tulane team, I'm not saying they're like the 95 Cornhuskers. I'm not saying that. But
so for everyone defending TCU and then turning around talking about Tulane beat the Big 12 champs last year. They beat the team that beat TCU in the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not going to put Tulane down either. Again, great team, balled out, made the plays they wanted to. But let's face it, anybody that watched that game, I'm not going to name the young man's name, but a guy fumbles the ball at the 2-yard line. They get it was a great comeback.
One game.
It's not like the team or the coaching staff. It was an unfortunate situation, and they lost. And
regardless of how they lost, it was one game, and that's a great win for Tulane. And I wouldn't call it an embarrassing. It's an embarrassing loss for USC just based on name brand, not based on what we know about the football teams, because they lost to one of the 15 best football teams in America.
USC went from 4-8 to the Cotton Bowl and lost. I don't know.
Michigan's lost to App State. Michigan's lost to Toledo. We can name all sorts of great football programs that have lost games.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Yeah, they lost a good job. There's another, I think, perfect cracker. You guys are, that other guy was your Oklahoma guy. Didn't they lose 7 games and lose to West Virginia last year? Who was a better team, Mark? West Virginia or Tulane last year?
Well, Tulane.
Yeah, it's not even close.
A ton.
So these Sooner guys talking crap, it's just almost embarrassing. Well, I mean, Sooner fan, what can you do?
Yeah, and USC didn't lose a game 49-0.
Yeah, well, Sooner fans, they still can't get over the fact that they got dumped, that are stepping stone school and they got dumped. I feel bad for them. But I just think that I'd love to see USC get some travel partners in Oregon and Washington. That would be solid. The thing I question is the fact that I'm just thinking they're going to save a spot for Notre Dame, even if they're being wishy-washy, Mark, and they're sitting back there not sure if they're going to join or not. That's the last really big crown jewel after Texas, Oklahoma, USC. There's not a lot of move the needle teams out there anymore.
No.
And Notre Dame is one of those move the needle teams, both being a blue blood and just the market and their fan base and everything about them. So,
well, that's when you talk about move the needle, you're talking about elite.
Yeah.
Oregon's still a great get. Washington's a great get. Florida State, Clemson.
I mean, of the ones we just named, Clemson's probably the biggest name, right? We would say. between Oregon, Washington, and Florida State. Clemson is probably your biggest bet of those four, but I think Clemson and Florida State, just like any good football coach, is start throwing his name in for these schools. You know he's not going to go just so he can get a raise, right? They're not going to get a raise, but what they want to do is they want an SEC invite. They want to try to push the SEC hand. I don't see those. I don't see those programs going to the Big Ten. Do you? Can you see Florida State joining the Big Ten? Clemson join the Big Ten? They seem like there's
If they go
SEC
together,
schools.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I would think that they would need to go together. They need a partner. They need somebody in the region.
Yeah.
If the Big Ten could get Notre Dame and they could bring the 3 from the ACC, then they've got 4 more. And there you go. Maybe they get Washington, Stanford, Cal, and Oregon. They've got 24, and they call it a day.
Immaculate. USC did. Why not FSU? I don't know. I'm sure. Are you comparing USC to Florida State? Going to the Big Ten, there are about 100 reasons why the Big Ten would take USC over Florida State. I don't think that's even a toss-up. That's not even close, I don't think. Mark, would you think that'd be a hard decision? If the Big Ten could choose USC or Florida State, do you think that'd be a close call?
Well, I don't want to crap on Florida State. That's a great brand, a great tradition, but it's not USC. No.
Yeah. I just love the hate that USC gets. I mean, it just means that, hey, listen, we don't have Helton as a coach anymore. You know, it's like it's the oh shit meter. Because I like the fact that people are getting worried, because you should be. We all know what happens if USC gets a good coach. And OU, you had a good coach and you slow played him. You didn't give him what he wanted. You didn't give him a staff. You didn't give him the facilities. You didn't give him the support. And he left.
He's a good coach. We don't know if he's a great coach yet. He hasn't sold me on being a great coach.
So you told me last year, he said
Yes.
he has all these appearances, but we don't know. He was handed the Oklahoma job. We don't know if he can build a program. That was a conversation we had a year ago. And I've seen him do one of the better turnarounds of any school I've seen in recent history. Talk about your island of misfit toys. USC's defense was an island of misfit toys, especially the front seven.
Well, you cannot compare what anyone can do today to what they could do pre-transfer portal. The ability of coaches to turn over rosters is nothing. So we can only compare him against Mel Tucker did that at Michigan State in one season. Mel Tucker took a 2-win team in the COVID year and made them an 11-2 Peach Bowl champion, top 10 team. I'm just saying, I want to see it play out a little bit more.
Oh, you're going to hold
proven
on
to me
Mark.
he's a great coach. He's not proven to me that he's a great coach.
Is Ryan Day a great coach?
He's not proven again. He may be, but he's not proven to me that he's a great coach. I would only put 3 coaches in college football in the great category.
Right. They've won multiple national titles.
Yes.
Yeah. Fair enough.
But Lincoln Riley's an excellent coach. I'll say that.
Well, I mean, what is he, 40?
Sure.
So he's to be at USC. He's getting everything. They're gonna give him everything he wants. Now they're in the Big Ten.
If
1A or
if we
how
could
you want to
see
look at
15
1B.
years in advance, there are coaches right now probably coaching in the group of 5. There's a couple that are going to be great coaches. We don't know who they are now.
No, we don't. But
Yeah.
there's not many coaches that have done what Lincoln Riley's done in the first 7 years of his career either.
True. Or Ryan Day.
Or
But they were
6
both
years.
handed
6 years.
very good situations.
Yeah, but the difference is now you would have to admit that one of those 2 coaches has started and built a program back up again. And you're
Yeah.
saying it was 1 year's not. Trust me, Mark, if you thought last year was good, on paper, this team coming in right now is better than the team that you had last year, not just in players, but in depth and everything. The only downgrade is I'd say there's probably they don't have a Jordan Addison that we know yet. But if you have a guy, there's a couple of young guys that if they emerge, I think they seriously could average 50 points a game this year. I really think they possibly could do that this year.
So,
And if their defense can get somewhere to the top 50 defense, top 40 defense, they're gonna be a problem for a lot of teams.
So our guy Jason is standing by here, and this should be entertaining here. So we've
Oh, this
got
guy's a moron.
Jason, Hall of Fame college
You're a
football
clown,
podcast.
dude. Come on, bro.
We got Tim,
Clown.
USC channel, Trojans Conquest. So what's the problem here? What is the
He's
problem?
a clown, man. He likes to talk a bunch of dumb crap, and he never
Okay,
has
let's
anything
not-
to back it up.
Let's not go the name route. Let's talk about facts.
He's
What
probably a
what
moron
are
before
the
anybody
what are
called
the
anybody a man.
opinions that are wrong here?
First up, which opinions are wrong? That,
Yes.
that Lincoln is a great coach. First of all, Lincoln got
might
handed a
be.
Ferrari. He got handed a Ferrari at OU, and they got worse every year. And you'll see the same thing from USC.
How was
They're
that
gonna be-
defense? How was that defense when he was handed the Ferrari?
That defense was bigger. They were in the freaking semifinal that
Dude,
year.
they
and
were
were
horrible.
ahead. They were bigger. I was in the Rose Bowl for that game. They were as big as Georgia was. They should have won the game. He choked it away.
That defense,
Just like
that
he choked
that
away
he
the Tulane
inherited.
game because they don't play freaking special teams.
That
And yet he does
defense,
Jason,
You let
can
me
I ask
talk,
you a
kid?
question?
this. Sure.
You need to be brutally honest with us because there's no way we can check you on this. What was your evaluation of Lincoln Riley when he was the coach at Oklahoma?
He's a great offensive coach. Great offensive coach.
That's what you were
and I've
saying,
said
Jason.
that.
You were
Great
critical.
offensive
You were
coach.
critical then.
Was
You
I
weren't thinking he was the
critical?
top coach in college football back when he was your coach. Really?
Of course not. No, he's not even, dude. If you think anybody but Nick Saban is the top coach in college football, you are dumb.
I said a top coach. Listen,
No,
listening skills.
no, because of what happened in the playoffs every year. You got to have to prove that you're more than just an offensive genius. I covered Mike Leach during those days. He put points on the board. It's not about scoring. You know what? You just said they're going to put up 50 points. They're going to need every freaking one of them
No, they won't.
because yes, they will. They're not going to be better on defense, bro. Watch. Bear will
Wait,
come in. Bear will come in at
whoa. You said they're not gonna be better on
285
wait. You just said they're
instead of
not gonna be better on defense. Is that what you said?
They're
You
not
just
going to be
said,
better on
you said
defense.
USC's not gonna be better on defense, really?
Correct. I
Oh
said
my
it.
god.
They'll probably have all lost 50 freaking pounds
Okay.
if they got there, all your defensive linemen.
My question is so I have a question for you. Is OU gonna be better on defense next year?
A lot.
A lot. You know why? It's called year 2. And guess what? You know who's gonna be better on defense?
You know
USC.
what?
You know why?
They have defensive
year
coaches
2.
that have been worth the crap ever. And they don't have a yoga instructor as their freaking strength and
Dude,
conditioning
the
coach.
guys at USC are bigger than all they've ever been. These guys are
No, they're-
huge.
No, they're
All
not.
that
I
BS
promise
you
they're
guys
not. I
talked about the fact that
promise
they
you
couldn't
they're
get
not.
bigger.
I promise you they're not.
Mark, do me a favor. Go find this guy in about 6 months when he hides, because we're gonna have this conversation at the end of the year.
Bro,
And this dude is gonna be hiding so far in some little hole
really? You
somewhere.
don't know anything about me, dude. I don't hide from nothing.
No, I'm sure we're shaking, bud.
Yeah.
Look at me.
I don't hide from
I'm
nothing.
sure you.
You guys both understand that both of these programs could be great. They
No.
could both be
I've
great.
got SC going 8-4 at best.
I'm
what-
not talking about
9-3
this
at
year. I'm
what's
talking
Oklahoma
about
doing?
both of these coaches could work out, and these
Yeah.
could be two of the
OU's
top.
already out recruited him every year that he's been gone. And according to
You mean
Lincoln,
one
you
year?
couldn't recruit. You
One
couldn't
year?
recruit 2 seasons. They've had 2 recruiting cycles. Don't you? Can you count?
1 year. He's been
They've
there
had
1
2
year.
recruiting cycles. They had the
You don't
recruiting
count.
cycle-
Listen, hey, genius. You don't
Hey,
count
genius,
a 1
you
month.
have to recruit your own team whenever Lincoln left.
Are you
the-
done?
Venables
you know how
had
this
to
works?
recruit, just
Did you
like
go to
just like
kindergarten?
Lincoln did. Just like Lincoln did.
Okay.
He had
So
to
let me
recruit
explain-
his team when
Oh
he
my-
got there. Did he not? Did he
Okay,
not
so
have to
can I
recruit
talk
his team?
now?
Did he not have to recruit his team? Answer the question.
So are you counting a recruiting cycle as 1 or 2 months? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Yes.
You're a moron, dude.
I'm a
How
moron
could you
because
even-
he
how
had
can
to
you begin
recruit-
to
he had
think that
recruit
a coach
everybody.
getting
You didn't-
hired
you didn't
in
get that with the
November,
Lincoln? You didn't
and
get that
then
with
it-
the Lincoln? You're a clown. A total clown, bro. It's clown
So
school.
anyway,
Every
you
time
were
you talk,
saying-
you don't get it. You don't get it, bro. They
You're
had to
saying-
recruit their own guys.
Are you, dude, are you let me talk? You're saying that they got hired in November and signing days in December, less than a month. You're saying that's a recruiting cycle?
Yes, they had to recruit those
Bro,
guys.
you just
None
showed
of
how
those
little
guys
you
that Lincoln
you just showed
recruited-
how little you know.
Oh, so Lincoln didn't recruit his team when he got to the USC.
How many of those guys
He
that
didn't
you're doing
recruit his team when he got to USC.
how many of those
Answer
guys?
the question.
How many of those guys that you're calling your recruiting class did Lincoln Riley
None of
recruit
them.
for OU?
None of them.
None of them. So
Almost
none of the guys that
I
were
think they might
committed
have had one or
stayed.
two guys that were being recruited
One or
by
two
Lincoln.
guys stayed.
You know what Lincoln was doing while
One
he
or
was
two
at
guys
USC,
stayed on that commit. They
or
were
while he
committed.
was still at Oklahoma.
call
Lincoln
bullshit.
had assistant coaches recruiting to SC long before they ever took the job at SC, or at least
One guy made a phone call.
Clown.
Relax. So anyway, so you want to call a recruiting cycle
Clown.
less than
Clown.
1 month, Jason?
Yeah, I
settle
do.
down, dude. You don't know what you're talking about.
They gave it all to Lincoln what he did at SC. Did they not?
What?
Did they not give the recruiting cycle that he had when he came into SC? Was that not his cycle?
Okay. So let me explain this to you. How many guys at USC recruit from high school? They didn't have time. And most of the guys that were committed, they didn't want. So what they did is they had a very small class, and they probably bring in some guys through the portal in the spring. You're trying to get a one up saying that you're counting that as a recruiting class and recruiting cycle and putting that on Lincoln Riley. That shows you how little you know. He had less than 1 month to recruit
You know
that.
how many of
That's
those guys
moronic,
that were
dude.
coming into that
That is
recruiting class?
moronic.
It's not moronic whenever
It
you
absolutely
can
stupid,
you either
bro.
hold up the recruits or you don't hold them up. It's not
What are you
moronic.
talking about, dude?
Because there were recruits for OU and there were recruits that were being recruited at SC already, were there not? You either keep them, you don't keep them.
He didn't want them. They weren't quality. Do you understand? That's
So
why you
they
ran.
did-
That's why we
Look at- go
ran.
back
See,
and
the
look at the
difference here
recruiting-
is you don't
go
understand.
back and look at the recruiting rankings from last season, from the last cycle, the
I'm
2020.
gonna let you rant for a little bit, then I'll have my say.
Giving it to Lincoln. All your USC guys, they're giving it to Lincoln. Tell me they're not.
Are you done? Okay, so what
Answer
you
the
just
freaking
said.
question,
I don't-
Tim. You can never answer a question.
Your question isn't answerable. It's a waste of time.
I said, is that not Lincoln's recruiting class? Is it?
No,
or is
it's
it
not. Last
Oh,
year,
yes,
the
it
year
is.
before, when he got there with
Come
1
on,
month to
dude.
recruit,
You're the
that's
only
not
one
a
that says
recruiting class.
stupid
No.
stuff like that. You're
That's
the only one that
moronic.
says stupid stuff like that. So
You're an
all
idiot,
those
bro.
transfers, they didn't transfer to him either. That's not part of recruiting.
So let me explain this to you, Jason. Because your
I
old
don't need
coach,
explanations.
your
from
your
you.
old
You have
coach,
nothing.
your old coach was winning 11 plus 10 plus games a year.
The
and
turnover there.
rolling,
Are you
and
gonna
had,
do this?
dude,
Are
you
we
shut
gonna
up.
do
I let
this?
hey, shut up. I let you talk. Be quiet a minute.
You're a
And
clown.
then
bro.
he had your recruiting
Clown.
flying, and you had a good recruiting class coming in. Our guy, Helton, was a train wreck, and he was bringing in any bodies he could bring in.
Okay.
And Lincoln Riley got there and said, this isn't going to work. I'm not giving these guys scholarships. So if you go look at that recruiting class, it's tiny. Why? Because he kept the guys he could work with and got rid of the other ones. Is that too hard to figure out, Jason? Dude had less than 1 month.
He recruited.
Dude
Yeah,
had less than 1 month, Jason.
so did Venables. Venables actually
That
had less
class was
time.
already
He
set
recruited
up,
in the
dude.
top 8. Go look and see which guys
Wow.
that they were still recruiting, that were Lincoln's, because there weren't many.
So here's
There
what I'm
weren't. So
explaining to
they
you.
got their own guys. They
Hey,
went in there
Jason,
and got them.
Jason, you're talking a bunch of bullshit. Your
I'm
team
not
went 6
talking
and,
bullshit.
What was your
talking
record
bullshit.
last year, Jason?
Yeah, because the team was.
What was your
gutted.
record last year,
The team was
Jason?
gutted. We know what it was. We know what it was.
What was
Everybody
it?
acts like it was the same.
I
team
asked you a
when the
question.
Heisman
What
winner
was your
went with them. They
what
went
was your
6 and
record? I
7.
asked you a
They went
question,
6 and
Jason.
7, Yeah,
Aren't you going to answer the question, Jason?
I just did answer it, clown.
What was it?
It was 6 and 7, and why?
Right.
Why was it? Why was it? Because he took,
Venables was the first time coach and lost to West Virginia. I don't know what.
no. So they had the same team that they had whenever Lincoln was there. Is that what you're trying
Why
to
didn't
say?
he keep the guys
Is
there,
that what
Jason?
you're trying to ask me?
Jason, why didn't he keep those guys there? He had a 10-win season the year before. How come you
could
couldn't keep
how
them?
could he keep the guys there? And on defense, he kept the guys that he could on defense that were even worth the
Why
crap.
didn't they stay, Jason?
Why didn't they stay? Because he gutted the team on the way out. You realize that he was recruiting for SC while he was still employed at OU.
Jason,
you know
those
that,
guys
right?
went
He's
to
a
OU to play
scumbag
for Lincoln
scumbag.
Riley, not to
He
play at
screwed
OU.
it up on the way out. He screwed it up on the way out. That's why.
He
It wasn't
screwed
the same team. Saying that it was the same team that went
How
11
come
and
your
2
coach
is the
couldn't keep
dumbest
the
thing
players
ever.
there?
It's the dumbest thing ever to say that he had inherited an 11 and 2 freaking program. He didn't. The Heisman Trophy winner went with
How's your
Lincoln.
recruiting class so far this year, Jason? for the 24 class.
See about that. They're going to have two.
No,
of the top three
Jason,
defensive tackles
where are they right
live.
now? Not where you want them to be, Jason. Where are they now?
Wait until you see it.
No. What number? Where are you ranked right now?
Go look it up, buddy. Go look it up.
Well,
Right.
The cycle's
Where'd
not
you go?
over
Get
yet.
up, question, Jason.
Go look it up, clown.
The recruiting cycle's not
Oops.
over. We'll know in December. Okay, let's finish up in this way.
Well done,
They
Jason.
were
You
number
won that round.
4 in
Let's-
23,
let's-
buddy. They were number
let's-
4 in
let's finish
2023.
up in
They
this way.
out-recruited your boy.
Let's finish
They
up in this
out-recruited
way
your boy.
because we
Oh.
have people on here that want to talk realignment, and that was the basic reason why we're here. So, Jason, tell us everything that you want to. What are all your points concerning Lincoln Riley and why he's not as good as other people think that he is, or whatever you want to get out there?
There's
Lay
a
it all out
thousand
there,
things you can
and
say
we'll,
about it. You
we'll
can-
be
there's a
quiet,
thousand
and
things.
you lay it all out there, and then Tim will have his say.
Okay. Just like I said, they're going to get smaller every year that he's there. They won't get better on defense. He doesn't make it an issue. You got Bear. One guy is going to play maybe 25, 30 snaps a game. They're still not going to be better there. They're not. They're not going to be better. They're not going to be better on defense. It'll be about the same because that's how it always is. It's always next year they're going to be better. Until they get an actual defensive coordinator and Lincoln actually cares about defense, it will never be that way. And there's a reason behind it all. And as much as I loved Mike Leach, he was the same way. He was the same way. And this is all part of his tree. This is how they all do it. This is why none of them have won a national championship. The other reason is because of the strength and conditioning. The guy that you have for the strength and conditioning coach, they call him the yoga instructor at OU. They got so much smaller. They got so much smaller year after year after year. And immediately, since Venables has been hired, they've gotten way bigger, completely bigger, stronger, faster. And the guy, hey, our strength and conditioning coach has trained 7
sure he
Heisman
is.
Trophy winners.
I'm
7.
sure.
It has happened. Look it up.
Now, before Tim goes, Jason, make your point about recruiting because you
Yeah,
guys
the
were
recruiting part,
screaming over
yeah,
each
you
other.
couldn't do
Make
that.
your point about the recruiting situation in the classes.
Well, the first thing I'm going to say about that is he said whenever he left that the reason he was leaving was because you can't recruit elite talent to Norman. He couldn't. They just got the number 1 running back in the country over USC. And I'm sure we'll get a good excuse about that. They've also, they're in line for 3 of the top 5 defensive tackles in the country in this class. Not to mention Nigel Smith, who's going to be on the show on Tuesday. These guys are going to put together probably one of the best defensive line classes, the best defensive classes in the history of the sport. Even that's where they're headed on it. You're going to see it happen, and you can wait and see. And he already out recruited him last year too. If you don't want to count the first year, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of, by the way, because of the fact that you do have to go and recruit your team no matter what. And it's why they probably didn't want to win the Oklahoma State game, because he knew that if he took that job and they had another week, then Lincoln wasn't going to get to go recruit for SC. You have to recruit. Your team is your team the second you take it over, and then you still had another month before signing day. And that's how it works. That is how it works. And if you go back and look, they gave Lincoln credit for his recruiting class out there. He had a big portal class. We all know that. He does that. He's great at the portal. He's not great at real recruiting, and he's certainly not good at defensive recruiting. That's why you lost Mateo this past season.
Okay, before we cut Tim loose, can I make this one point where I can agree with both of you, because you're both taking it to what I think is an extreme because of this case. When a coach takes over a program, this happens every time. It's in December. That's when coaches get fired, and that's when coaches get hired, and they're trying to maintain a recruiting class that, depending on what part of the country they're coming from, they may have a lot of familiarity with those players. They may have recruited them where they were coming from, or they may be a situation where it's a Dan Lanning where he's going all the way across the country and he has only some ties to those players. Every situation, of course, is different. So I would hope that we can agree that coach is responsible for that recruiting class because he took the job and he has to maintain. Some coaches have been great at maintaining what the previous coach was doing, and others haven't been so successful, but it's his responsibility to maintain that recruiting class, but he didn't have that full cycle to recruit and sign those players.
It's
Correct?
just absurd. I don't honestly understand where Jason's going with that. I have no clue.
What does that have to do with anything? You still have to recruit that class either way. They still are either coming to your school or they're not. You can lose.
Sure.
But
if that
it's
makes
not-
you feel better, great.
It's
You
not
can
the
lose
first
them or
full
you may not
recruiting
lose.
class for that particular coach.
Huh?
But it's
What'd you
not
say?
the first full
Full recruiting
cycle.
class. That's fine, but he still maintained a top 10 recruiting class, and he backed it up with the number 4 recruiting class.
Yeah.
In the country, getting 3 5-stars, which is the same amount that Lincoln ever got.
So,
Ever.
all right. All right. You good? Or do you have more?
Continue. Go.
Okay. So you keep bringing this point about a 1 month recruiting cycle, not even a whole month. USC signed 8 players.
Okay.
8. But then they turned around and they pulled in 20 guys from the portal. And overall, their recruiting class overall was 6th in the country in 1 month. See, because those guys he did decide to keep, because he cut all the little bodies that Helton was trying to bring in. He got guys like, maybe tell me if you've heard of these guys: Domani Jackson, Zion Branch, CJ Williams, Raleigh Brown, Fabian Ross, Garrison Madden. Those are all 4-star guys, studs that will be studs. But then he went out in the portal because he knew he had, Jason, 1 month, and he didn't want to take on the guys Helton was bringing in. So congratulations. You guys he did actually out-recruit Riley that year, the overall, by like 1 point. And he had 3 more guys. So really, I'll call that a draw, man. So even the year you said that he out-recruited Riley, he really didn't out-recruit Riley.
This
Okay.
past season, he didn't.
Okay, so let's look at it. You had 43 commits and SC had 40. Okay. This is 247 numbers. Your score was 295.53. USC was 294.41. 1 point difference.
They lost.
And here's the thing I want to explain. I'm sure you know this, Jason, because you're a football guy. These are arbitrary numbers. So realistically, did they out-recruit them? If you want to play a game, like you're using 1 point on the 240. Mark, let me ask you this question because you're going to be sensible about this. Mark, do you think these numbers are empiric and these are statistical numbers that are science?
Oh my God.
Well, of course they're not science. No.
But
dude,
they're pretty
stop
damn
it.
close,
But they
right?
mean
They all
something.
go, but they all
They
get
do mean
rated
something.
by the same freaking
But does 1
numbers.
point mean anything, Mark? Would you say someone's a better recruiting class if they have a 1 point difference?
Do you realize that
Wait, Jason, I was talking to Mark if you weren't aware.
They're all in the top 5 of recruiting at least 2 years out of like the past 5. You realize that, right?
Well, so I was looking at the chat. What'd you say?
Of like the past 8 or 9 national champions, every one of them has been in the top 5 of the recruiting rankings at least twice in 5 seasons. It's not even close. That you can say whatever you want about their, it's only that he fell behind, that you're making excuses about the rankings not being real.
No, bro, it's one fucking. Sorry, Mark. It's 1 point. It's literally 1 point.
doesn't matter.
And you're
It doesn't
puffing
matter.
your chest like you think it's some big victory. It's moronic.
1 point.
It's
Where
embarrassing.
do they end up in? Let's see.
Ready?
Let's look at it.
Here you go. Ready?
23,
11 and 3,
23.
6 and 7. That's the real number from last year,
Okay.
right? And you're talking about 1
Yeah,
point
no.
from 247
so
recruiting.
The recruiting class isn't
By the
yours.
way,
If
that
the
1
recruiting
point,
class isn't
you
yours when
recruited
you
3
first
more
get there,
people
why
than
is the
USC.
team yours? If the recruiting class isn't yours when you first get there, then why the hell is the team that you have to
So let's
inherit
move
yours?
on.
How
Okay,
much
so
is
let's
it?
move on.
Oh,
Jason,
no, I
relax.
would want to move on
Jason,
too,
relax.
because you just got busted again.
Jason, wait, I got busted what?
Biggest argument ever.
Wait,
If the
what I got busted
recruiting
on?
class doesn't belong to you when you get there, why the hell does the team belong to you?
Because he built it. Did you hear what I just said?
You didn't build it. Oh my God.
Mark, you help me out on this. How many people did he run off that program and bring in that last year's team?
I'm asking you a
What
question.
percent-
How many people did he gut
Jason.
off of the OU team too?
Jason, you know how this works? People talk in turns, and I was talking to Mark. Relax. Mark, you're aware of USC's roster, right?
Yes.
Would you say that he substantially changed the roster in 1 year?
Of course he did.
and the 2
But
deep
you
was
just
almost
told- you
brand
just got
new.
done saying that the recruiting wasn't about him.
So he brought all
It's not
that
his
in.
recruiting class.
So he brought all that in.
How is it one? How is it his team? that
We were
he
discussing,
rebuilt? But
Jason. We were
it's not
discussing high
his recruiting
school.
class, and that wasn't his recruiting class at OU either.
Jason, if you
God,
want to have this
dude,
conversation,
come
you
on.
need to stop talking over people, man.
You're a
Because
clown.
you're really not bringing
You're
anything
a
new.
clown.
You're just
I'm going to
talking.
keep saying that. I'm going to keep telling you you're a clown.
Dude, I don't really
A
care.
clown.
What, believe me, bro. I don't care what you think. So
Oh,
let's go
super
back to it,
good.
Mark. Can we put this guy on mute? Because I'm going to do it in a second if he just keeps talking over me. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah,
Oh,
let's
So let's let
talk
people
where
talk.
people can
Because
actually
I think
hear
Mark,
what
you
everybody's
said-
saying.
Yeah, Mark, you did say, I don't care about calling me names. Mark, you did say,
Clown.
now, Jason, you're going to have your say, and then Tim's going to follow up, right?
Yes.
This guy clearly didn't learn, turn taking rules in grade school or something. I
You
don't
didn't
know.
let me talk either. but
Here he
go ahead.
goes.
Go ahead. I'll mute myself. Go.
Oh, thank you. So you also brought the comment about Benny Wiley as a yoga instructor making people smaller. It's literally a storyline how much bigger all these guys are in our program. It's a storyline in the newspapers. The sizable difference in our offensive line, our defensive line, our linebackers, our All-American safety. They called him Sticks. He put on 35 pounds in 1 year. Sticks isn't a stick anymore. He's ready for the NFL. So all the Oklahoma talk you guys have been saying about Benny Wiley, it looks like a bunch of bullshit at this point. Because across the board, every one of these guys are bigger. All these guys have personal bests in the weight room. And so we'll see. By the way, all of the major publications I've seen so far, I don't see Oklahoma's offensive line listed anywhere. I see USC anywhere from 8 to 4 as the best offensive line in the country. I don't see any beat 'em bow offensive line at all anywhere. Have you, Jason? Have you seen them listed anywhere? Top 10? No, they're not. So they're getting bigger and stronger as well.
Bill Beatonbow has put more guys in the first round of the draft from the offensive line than your guy has by a long shot. So I wouldn't go there.
How long has he been a coach?
How long has he been a coach?
Yeah, offensive line coach. How long?
Oh, I'm not positive about that. Over 10 years, but he's put a lot of them in.
Past,
A lot
in the past
of
3
them in.
years. In the past 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, how many first round offensive linemen has he put into?
He
into
just
draft?
put another one in this season.
Now, how many last 5
Just
years?
Put another one in there this season.
Okay, one. How many before that in the past 5 years?
Look it up, clown, on your own.
Yeah, the answer is none
You want to bet?
in the last 5 years.
Okay.
He got one this draft.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead. Continue.
I just heard all the story about we don't have
I
our
didn't say that they
efficient
don't
guys.
have an offensive line.
Jason, well, remember how this works?
I didn't say they
So-
don't have an
so
offensive line. I didn't say they don't have an offensive line. They will
No,
have. They'll be great on offense. They'll be great on offense. That's what they do.
Yeah. So let me also explain to you that there isn't just Bear Alexander they brought in, but they brought in studs. Because by the way, Mark, have you ever met have you ever met any coach anywhere that doesn't care about defense?
You do. If you've met Lincoln, you have.
Mark, do you believe that Lincoln Riley does not care about defense?
I would hope that any coach at that level would care about everything because winning is going to keep the job.
Can I ask
Yeah.
you one quick question, Tim? Do they have a special teams coordinator now?
No.
Yeah.
By the way, you think that's unique?
Games.
Just you show us how much football you know. Do you think it's unique not to have a special teams coach?
Yes,
That's unique in football.
it is.
That's unique.
Yeah,
No, you're wrong.
it is. It's unique.
Okay.
Among
You're wrong.
among the best teams in college football, that's very unique.
No. That's not what I said. No. That's not what I
Against the
said.
best teams in college
Not what I said.
football, it's quite unique.
I said it's not unique.
It's unique.
So your comment about them being smaller and a yoga instructor, that's BS. The fact about the recruiting being stronger,
Why is it not
that's
unique?
BS.
Why is it not unique? Because Mike Leach didn't have
and
one.
the fact that you
Because
want to talk
Mike Leach
about
didn't have one.
Dude, Jason, do you remember how this works?
No, I don't care what you're talking about. You tell me why it's not unique.
All right. We've got some other callers on the
Hold on,
line,
hey, Mark,
and
just-
we
hey, Mark.
are
Clown.
sitting
Hey,
here.
Mark.
Clown.
Hey, Mark, you
Yeah,
gave this
we're
guy
sitting
a
here
few
at 3
minutes.
o'clock in the morning because
You
of
gave this guy a few
realignment.
minutes, Mark. I want to respond to his moronic comments.
Okay.
So So first
we're
off,
going 30 seconds each.
well, no, hold on. He already has a chance to talk. We already heard his spout his bullshit. Okay.
It's not bullshit. You haven't said one thing that's been real. Not one
What?
thing. Not even one thing.
All right, Mark. Good luck with this guy.
All right. I appreciate you both being here. All right. We will keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We got Squid Tart here. Did
Oi.
you take all that in?
That was some quality entertainment to start out with.
It was something. And yes, I just realized at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I started this because of realignment, and now we're having an Oklahoma USC discussion. So I was, if that's what we want to call it, Oklahoma USC argument. So
That's how you know.
I started this. So we're going to get this back on track. How you doing tonight?
Doing all right. What we just witnessed is how you know the college football season is close, because you don't get these types of arguments in January or
Between
February.
those two, I'm not so sure about that. I think we could get that at any point.
Yeah, probably.
Because the Oklahoma USC blood is boiling on both.
It's turning into a rivalry now.
Yes.
I'm all for it. Don't get me wrong. I'm absolutely all for it. I want to see those two play more than anything, but we probably won't get that for a while unless they meet wherever. But that's for another time. But yeah, about conference realignment and everything, Colorado getting picked up by the Big 12. Honestly, in my mind, it just kind of shows that the Big 12 is not necessarily desperate to pick up guys. But if Colorado was their first option out of anybody, then there might be some issues ahead. I think if the Big 12 wants to compete for any sort of championship in the future, they're going to have to pick up an Oregon or a Washington, and there's talks about that. But even then, the chances are low, because you got the SEC who just picked up Texas and Oklahoma, and they already have a bunch of teams that are winning national championships every single year. And then if it's not them, then you got the Big Ten, who of course has still got Ohio State, Michigan, and then just picked up USC. So both of those conferences have a bunch of talent there. It's going to take a lot of work from the other conferences. So to be honest, I don't see really how any of the other conferences compete. I mean, the ACC is up there with, Clemson and Florida State, but now there's talks about Florida State or Clemson heading to one of the other, the big boy conferences. So in my mind, if either of them do that, then who are they going to pick up to compete? Well, what group of 5 team can they pick up to even get close to competing with that? I don't really see how that plays out for them too well.
Well, the way you just framed it up, you can look at the Big Ten as holding the Big 12's future in its hand, because if the Big Ten takes Washington and Oregon, then that only makes, of course, the Big Ten stronger. But and they certainly don't need those schools nearly as much as the Big 12. If they leave those two schools and the Pac-12 continues to crumble, then those two schools will have the most viable options going to be the Big 12, and those two schools become the two best on Washington and Oregon, or they can make it extremely difficult for the Big 12 to be relevant. And when I say relevant, I mean competing for championships and having second playoff teams coming out of the Big 12.
Right. And if the Big 10 picks up, Washington and Oregon, or even just one of them, it's going to make it quite more difficult for the Big 12 to really compete and pick. I guess the reason they went with Colorado is because, most people believe in the future that Deion Sanders is bringing to Colorado. But, he's done a great job through recruiting, but we have yet to see results from there. Let's not forget that Colorado was probably one of the worst teams in the Power 5 last season, only had, I think, 1 or 2 wins And now, it's going to be a build up for him. And I don't think we'll see results immediately. To be honest, I think they should throw a parade if they go 6-6 and go bowling in the first year. So if Deion Sanders continues to do what he does there and they give him time to build up, then I think Colorado could be one of those premier teams in the Big 12 in the future. But as it stands for the close future, it's the Big 12 probably won't be really competitive in the national scheme of things. And of course, people are going to mention TCU, and I think TCU is an outlier, and they're losing quite a bit of the talent that they have. So, I mean, as it stands right now, how's the Big 12 going to compete if they don't pick up Washington and Oregon?
I hear you. Anything else you want to bring to the table?
Yeah, that's about it. I feel like it's pretty obvious who I'm a fan of. As you guys know, I'm a big Alabama fan, as you can tell. Love me some Crimson Tide. Yeah, saw them talking about it in the comment section.
I like that.
Yeah, they're already talking trash, and that's all right. What's there to be expected? Don't worry, we'll be back for you. Specifically, I see a bunch of Michigan fans in there talking. I've heard a lot of talk about how like Joe Milton ain't going to be any good, and of course that's why Michigan fans are talking, is because PTSD.
I got to say that I'm a bit curious on Joe Milton. I don't know which way this is going to break, because when I watched Joe Milton at Michigan, he was certainly not ready to go. And then when I saw him replace Hendon Hooker 2 years ago, especially that game against Ole Miss that they could have come back and won, he didn't look ready. He was lost. But when he got into the games last year, albeit they were meaningless games, low leverage games, he played extremely well. Then he gets the Orange Bowl shot and he plays a top 10 defense in the country and he looks great.
Yeah, it's extremely unpredictable because, on one side of the coin, you're like, oh, look at how improved Joe Milton is. He's going to, show out and, put up a bunch of yards under this Josh Heupel offense. And then there's the other side where it's like the Clemson game was just it was a one-trick thing. It's not going to happen again. He's going to come out the first few games of the season and look terrible, and then he's going to get replaced by the true freshman Nico Iamaleava, whatever his last name is. But point is, there's a lot of conflicting things with Joe Milton. And, these Michigan fans that are sitting here talking about, and it's not all of them, of course, but there are a lot of Michigan fans that say Joe Milton will never be good because look at how bad he looked at Michigan. The only thing that confirms, at least from that point of view, is that it's impossible for a player to improve in their career. It's just literally impossible. I mean, look at Joe Burrow at LSU. Before his, 2019 year where he won the Heisman and shocked everybody, and oh my gosh, look at how great he is. He was your average run-of-the-mill quarterback. Nobody went into the 2019 season and said that Joe Burrow was going to even come close to winning the Heisman. And I'm not saying that Joe Milton is getting ready to do any of that either, but, he's going to improve. He has shown already that he has improved and learned from the big mistakes that have cost him 2 years ago. I think he's going to shock a lot of people.
I would argue some of your points to the T, but in general, I'm right there with you. I totally get your points, make total sense. I would say that Joe Burrow was a much better quarterback going into that season than Joe Milton is now. He had shown me enough. He threw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns in the bowl game against UCF, but and ripped up Texas A&M right before that. But yes, he was not Joe Burrow. I'm going to be the number 1 draft pick in the NFL draft. Absolutely.
But I do think part of that is because of the kind of shoddy playing defense that LSU put up, kind of like what Tennessee had, towards the end of the season. You got to have a pretty ugly defense in order to let, South Carolina put up 63 on you. So, it's not a perfect situation. And in order for Joe Milton to get really far, I think he is going to need some help. I don't think he's necessarily going to put up the same amount of numbers as Hendon Hooker did. But I do think that he's going to show out, and he's got the offensive firepower. We have a whole bunch of elite wide receivers. We have one of the best offensive minds in the country as the head coach at Tennessee. It'll be interesting though, since we did lose our offensive coordinator to South Florida, but I don't think offense will be necessarily an issue. The only thing that really concerns me, of course, is his play and then the depth that the defense has got this season. But we'll see how it goes. There's a lot of uncertainty with this, and looking forward to seeing how it plays out. I'm just excited to have some college football back, so it matters.
Absolutely. Well, good to see you, Squidtard.
You know it. All right.
Good one.
Talk with you later.
All righty. And we've got Seminole Fire. Of course, he's mighty invested in this news. So we got Seminole Fire here.
Hi, am I on?
You are on. What's going on tonight?
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for your patience.
First time I've really done anything like this.
Well, I appreciate it.
I just wanted to offer any Seminole point of views, add a few things. It seems like a lot of the folks who are weighing in on the topic of this expansion and the rumors that FSU may be going to the Big Ten don't fully understand how we see it. We're between a rock and the hard place when you look at it in the long run. It's really shaping up like we're going to have two large power conferences at some point, and then the rest. And the ACC doesn't project to be there. If we are stuck in the current contract with them until its end of term, we'll be even so far behind, we don't think we'll ever catch up. And as far as the grant of rights and all those other binding issues to the ACC, they're going to go away one way or the other, if we even make it and survive that long. So we're willing. I think most Seminole fans would probably prefer to be in the SEC, but we're willing to see the other perspective too, and that it's going to be one or the other in the long haul if we're going to survive at all. So the Big Ten looks attractive if they'll take us. It would be nice if they take some more of our regional teams along with us. We've seen them do that with the West Coast. Obviously, USC and UCLA would, as shown, took precedence in that expansion. But if the Big Ten truly wants a national conference, as they seem to say, then they have to ultimately expand into the Southeast and get what they can. And obviously, Clemson and FSU are the most attractive teams there. And if it was up to me, and I think to most Seminole fans, we'd like to see a few more come out of the area too, including Miami and another former ACC team. It may be pertinent to point out that, the faster the ACC dissolves, if you will, eases it up for all of us that are trying to get out of there. And I don't know that, we may be close to already having a majority that don't want to stay. So
Seminole Fire, if you were going to take one other school with you, if it was only going to be one, would you rather have Clemson or Miami?
I think it would make better sense to have Clemson. I know we would want to somehow be able to keep continuing our rivalry with Miami. I think
which would be tough to do.
One of the earlier callers, I haven't heard all the callers. I got in kind of late, but
that would be almost impossible to do. However, unfortunately, not to cut you off, but to your point, if you're playing a 9-game schedule in the Big Ten, and now Miami's an out-of-conference game and Florida's an out-of-conference game, you're certainly not going to play a Big Ten schedule and then also play Florida and Miami.
It could be that way.
Year.
Yeah, it could very well be too tough to do that. But there's also, some creativity that could be employed down the road by the conference itself. If you get yourself too large, how do you really have any crossover? If you're, let's say you have a large conference, you get up to 20 teams, 24 teams even, and you divide into just 4 divisions, then all those divisions are still very locked in, formalized, probably geographically isolated to a point. I think the future is going to have to be something more like smaller pods. Let's say if it was a 24-team conference ultimately, the southeastern section could be one of the pods of 4 teams, and we could get Miami in there that way. And, they can go ahead and add Oregon and Washington to the West Coast. Then the crossover games, I think there's going to be some creative thinking needed, but I think you can very well, have a certain set of fixed crossover games between the pods that are going to happen. Perhaps you play, at least one team from every other pod once a year. But I think there can be some creative ways to schedule other games within the conference that are still marquee matchups, and not always rigidly scheduled, based on some form preset notion. In other words, make sure that we include within the conference schedule, but not necessarily tied to any pod configuration, a bunch of other marquee games so that you can preserve a lot of the classic old time rivalries that's already exists in the Big Ten, and preserve the ability for, say, like I would love to see Notre Dame be able to be pulled in under a picture like that. And I think it could be more attractive to Notre Dame if they're ever going to jump into a conference to give them a conference that truly gives them a nationwide presence, the ability to play many games, across the conference, or across the nation within the conference. So I think we could, creatively come up with some way to have incentivized games that are not necessarily part of the reoccurring pod rotations and permanent pod members, but also to have marquee matchups where, say, UCLA, if they weren't Notre Dame, if they weren't playing UCLA over in that pod, or let's say they were scheduled to play UCLA, well, they could still have a conference game with, say, USC, because we seem to think they'd like that, and then somehow incentivize that the teams that play those better matchups within conference are still not 100%. It has weight, but it's not necessarily a full win or a full loss when you participate in those non-counting games within conference. Just a thought.
All right, Seminole Fire. Anything else? So you would rather go with Clemson than Miami, and you would prefer to be in the SEC because of the regionality over the Big Ten?
Well, I think as if you polled most Seminole fans, they would probably prefer to be in the SEC. But realistically, I think a lot of people are warming up to the idea, or completely see the need that we have to get out of the ACC. We have to do it as soon as possible. And if the Big Ten presents a decent offer and the SEC is not willing to take us, because they so far haven't really seemed to show that much incentive to do so, then we should take the Big Ten.
Yeah, I would think that the SEC's incentive is going to be seeing another conference, the Big Ten, lap them.
Right.
Because obviously the teams on the West Coast are more likely to go to the Big Ten. They're not going to stretch all the way to the SEC,
Correct.
we don't think. But if the Big Ten's able to pull in, let's say, Florida State, Clemson, Miami, Notre Dame, some semblance of the two corners of the nation, and get that far ahead of the SEC, I would think that would cause the SEC to move. This talk that's going on right now, and the Big Ten taking in 4 other large football brands, would cause the SEC, because the SEC can only go so many places now. There's
Right.
only about 4 or 5 football brands left that can compete for conference championships.
Well, I mean, just to propose, let's say the Big Ten went crazy and not only pulled in Washington and Oregon, but pulled in Clemson, Miami, Florida State, and North Carolina, and perhaps one other ACC team. I don't know who's left for the SEC to take.
Exactly.
Other than perhaps one of the
And that's
Virginia teams and maybe North Carolina State. After that, I don't know who's truly attracted to them. I don't even think they want to consider Louisville or West Virginia.
and that's why I'm saying, I don't think I would not anticipate the SEC to stand by and watch this happen without trying to do something. Because
I agree.
yeah, there are, as it currently stands, take Notre Dame out of the mix in terms of taking schools from other conferences or the 2 weak conferences right now. There are 6 football playing schools that are either extremely strong right now or have shown the ability to be, in my eyes. And that's Washington, Oregon, Utah, and then on the other side of the country, Miami, Florida State, and Clemson. And that's it.
Right.
North Carolina can be a good football team, but again, that's all that's left.
Right. But I think if your aim is to also become, all those other factors are important. Certainly the traditions of your school, the value of your school, the fan base of your school, the eyes that it garners. But, I think the Big Ten, we'd like to think at least that they have desires on a larger geographic footprint to include more of the Southeast than just Florida and South Carolina. I'd like to think or hope that they would consider taking the likes of UNC and a lot of Seminole fans would disagree with me, but possibly even Georgia Tech to be in the Atlanta, Georgia market.
Yeah. I think too many of us also get caught up into recency bias, and we look at schools like Stanford and Georgia Tech and just think that they're worthless in football. Well, Georgia Tech was going to bowl games 5 years ago. They were playing in the ACC championship game 9 years ago. Like, you can win at Georgia Tech.
Right. I think it would elevate them. But really I don't really know personally how important it is anymore, how important it's going to be in the future. But, it's been traditionally a big thing about linear TV carriage rights and movement into new territories. Now, that seems to me maybe not quite as prevalent as it used to be, but I still see that, the Big Ten might very well be interested in North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida. All 4 of those states are growing larger in population.
Yeah.
A lot of times due to exodus from the Northeast. And, I just think that, for whatever is remaining of the linear carriage TV rights or TV money and so forth, it would be a good move. That gives you 4 states out on the West Coast and 4 new states in the Southeast. And, and at some point it's got to be overwhelming for Notre Dame, I would think. I'm not trying to say you would force them into it, but I just don't see how, it's going to be two conferences at some point, 2 super conferences plus Notre Dame perhaps. And why, I think you've given them about as much of attractiveness as you can give them to have a very, very national schedule, allow them to play, allow all teams to play some non-fixed in-conference games on a yearly basis that can change due to the demands of media and the consumer, et cetera, to make some real attractive bowl games. And especially in light of the fact that, the real bowl games that we're used to in postseason, how much of that is going to diminish as we get bigger playoff formats. So having these, specialized games that we may not know about until the following year's schedule production, producing bowl-like games within conference teams, because there'd be a bunch of them, could be financially helpful, especially if you could get some of them in neutral sites and so forth. that's my 2 cents. We're excited on our end to hope that we get out of the ACC. If it's the Big Ten, so be it. Like to be in the SEC. There's some cons with that too, but most fans do think it's a better cultural fit, and for travel reasons and such, to be in the SEC. But we would take the Big Ten in a heartbeat.
All right, Seminole Fire. Thanks for calling tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
One last thing about the Big Ten, and we've talked about this many times, and it's not genius on their part, but it seems to be the obvious smart move to make. The Big Ten realizes they're in a strength, even before all this happened and grabbing USC and UCLA. They were in a position of strength in regards to resources, money, school status and prestige, strong administrations, strong alumni bases, rich alumni bases. All those things were in their favor. However, there's a population shift that started whenever. It definitely accelerated in the 1980s and 90s and continues today. So there's a population shift that is moving against the Big Ten, and it's moving southwest. It's moving to the southeast. And therefore, something has to be done, because with all of their strengths, the Big Ten checks every box except for there are not enough football players in the footprint, in the traditional footprint. Therefore, we got to go get football players, has to be the mindset, and that's what they're doing. And then also the population is fighting against them as well. The population basically in places like Ohio is not declining. It's not in a state of alert like other states, but it's not growing. It's slightly growing, where it's exploding in places like South Carolina and Arizona and Florida and other places. So the Big Ten, obviously, they've studied this for years. They've recognized this, and they are countering that issue. All right. We do appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football. We've got our Big Ten live show coming up Monday at 6. That is in just about 15 hours. So we are not far away from that. Wanted to make mention that if you are wanting to get yourself set for fall camp, we have already produced and posted fall camp previews on Ohio State, Michigan, Minnesota, Alabama, Clemson, Oregon, Florida State, Oklahoma, and maybe some others I forgot. And coming on the way very soon in the next few days, Miami, Auburn, LSU, Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, TCU, Arkansas, and UCF, and others. In terms of fall camp previews, looking at the offense, breaking down the defense as well for all those teams. My prediction videos have been put on hold for quite some time after traveling to Big Ten Media Days and covering all of this. We will get on that as well. And keep in mind, we're only 4 weekends away from college football. Therefore, we are less than 4 weekends away from our 24-hour marathon that we have now been targeting to do a 3rd consecutive year. Yes, I'm announcing it right now, 24 consecutive hours leading into the season. So we will give you all the details on that. We will stay awake for 24 hours or something close to that. We'll take a few naps, but 24 consecutive hours of nonstop college football coverage leading into week 1. And we also have a channel update. Be looking out for that video in the next day or 2. Some important news concerning the channel. And when I say channels, I mean the network of the Voice of College Football with the many channels that we have involved. So improvements, and we will march on, and we will do so with your help, your support, your loyalty. We appreciate it. And the final comment coming in from Lemansky. Tim, love the fandom, but you may need heart medication when Trojans kick it in 2024. All right. Appreciate that, Lemansky. Yes, we are truly the GOAT. We are live at 3:30 in the morning because, hey, we do college football. And Lemansky, thank you so much. And I appreciate all the comments, positive comments coming in on the Big Ten media coverage Mark, loved your Big Ten Media Day coverage. I had somebody call me yesterday that I've not talked to literally in about 10 years. And they said, I'm in a sports bar the other day, and I look up, and because I'm kind of keeping track of the Big Ten Media Days, but I can't hear it. I'm just kind of observing it. And all of a sudden I look up. Should I really tell you what he said? He said, I see this baby face up there and that I recognized, and boom. Yeah, it was you. Slap Happy, thanks for being here, and a bunch of names and folks that we don't see on a regular basis. So we appreciate you being here and that you chose us for your college football fix tonight. We appreciate it. We'll be back here, everyone, on the main channel. So if you're watching on the Florida State, Clemson, and Oregon channels, we've got a main channel. Lock it in there for our Big Ten live show. I've got a premonition that we are going to be talking about some of these same things possibly in about 14 or 15 hours. Big Ten live show coming up, 6 o'clock Eastern on the main channel. We will see you then. Appreciate your support. The Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. Please grab it, use it when you shop on Amazon, and we will see you Monday at 6 Eastern